Hi, welcome back to the second part of Quicksilver. So happy to have you here today. This is like the good part of the book. I feel like the first part, like the first whole half of the book is kind of just set up for the back half. Like, we finally get some romance. Fisher stops acting like literally the meanest man alive. And also, the vampires finally show up. We, like, figure out, like, what the big bad is supposed to be, like, what the battle's supposed to be, what's happening in this world. All the good stuff happens in this half of the book, and I'm so excited to talk about it with you. So let's just, like, jump right in. Last we heard from our crew, they were headed to the war camp. We catch up with them as they, like, arrive in the war camp. And Ceres looks around when she arrives at the war camp, and she thinks to herself, this looks like a war camp. It's very astute. It's a very, like, keen observation from Miss Ceres. She sees what she sees, and she's going to call it out. It's clearly been a camp that has been set up for a while because it's not just tents. There are a lot of, like, permanently built buildings in the camp, and it's, like, completely bustling. It's full of people. Fae warriors are running about. Onyx was not invited to the war camp. He had to stay behind because Fisher was worried that Onyx would get caught and eaten by some of the people here, which is, like, kind of rude behavior, if you ask me. So they're at this war camp. It's located on this river, and on the other side of the river, they can see, I'm going to try my best here, but the pronunciation of, like, the Fae names is just never going to be my strength. There's a pronunciation guide in the front. Unless I'm actively sounding it out from the pronunciation guide, like, it does not stick in my brain. Almontroth. They can see it across the river, which is the seat of the enemy, aka Hell's Teeth. It is, like, the palace of the bad guy. And it's just across the river from them. We'll learn that the river is, like, a really important part of the whole war situation as we start to see battles happening. But essentially, like, this is the dividing line, is this river. Good guys on their side, bad guys on the other side. This tree guy named Holgoth shows up and lets them know that Kingfisher's tent has been prepared for them and they have breakfast ready. He is, like, a tree sprite. And Holgoth kind of is like, hey, the warriors would really love to hear from you, Kingfisher. And Kingfisher is like, Renfist will talk to them. And Holgoth is like, it would be, like, better if it was you. Like, you've been gone for, like, 100 years. So, like, if you could just say, like, hey guys, how are you doing? That would be great. And Fisher is like, Ren has executed this war perfectly while I've been gone. I see no reason for a change in leadership. They're his warriors and not mine. And so Holgoth is like, okay, because, like, at the end of the day, Fisher is his boss, and so it's not like you can tell him what to do. And Ren grumbles something in another language. Ren also clearly is kind of hoping that Fisher would step up and take some leadership, but he hasn't really. And then he heads to the armory. Then I think we do some training. So Carrion and Ren are sparring, and Ceres is watching, and Ren is also wall sparring with Carrion because it, like, only takes, like, half of his brain to do because Carrion is so much lesser equipped than him in terms of fighting because he's Fae. Ren is explaining that this river, like, kind of cuts through the whole of Yavalia, I think, at some points widening to, like, over a league wide, which I don't know how big a league is. But some parts it's only, like, a trickle or pool because that's how rivers work. Sometimes they're wide and sometimes they're narrow. And Carrion is whining about the fact that he is expected to stand against Ren, who is, like, at least double his size and Fae. But, like, Carrion is, like, actually doing, like, fairly well for himself. He's, like, fairly light on his feet. Like, clearly the training that he is undergone already, and kind of the fact that he, like, I don't think he came with absolutely no training from Zalaran has, like, served him well. Like, he's doing fairly well. And then Ren says to him, I fought alongside humans who roared in the face of certain death, held their own in the charge, and emerged victorious from battle. They did their people proud. Will you give in so easily? Like, he's like, Carrion, come on, don't be an embarrassment to the humans. Ren then goes on to explain that at Loyenball, at the center of the plains, the river's name is the Darn, I don't think I've said that. The Darn freezes solid, and it becomes the only path between the mountains and the sea because the mountains become so, like, packed with snow that you, like, can't pass through them. So in order to, like, get to the sea, you have to cross this, like, frozen. And then Ren switches and offers to spar with Ceres, and Ceres takes the sword, and Ren has his back, and he's, like, explaining something about the river to Carrion, like, kind of not paying attention, and Ceres raises her sword to, like, you know, get in a little hit before he's really paying attention, and Ren immediately turns around and, like, takes her to the ground, like, knocks her over, and Carrion's, like, in the back laughing, and he's like, you know what? That is pretty funny. I understand why you were laughing so hard while I was sparring with Ren. Ren, like, checks to make sure she's okay, and then offers to go again, and Ceres agrees. Like, she, like, really would like to learn how to fight with these Fae warriors. And she like feels really she's like really happy to have access to a weapon for the first time since she has been captured. It like makes her feel more like herself in that she's able to like protect herself. And she like really hurls herself into it, and she's like fighting as hard as she can, and she actually winds up making Ren retreat a step, and she's like pretty proud of herself. Obviously she did not best him, but like that's a big move because Ren is like huge. He's like double the height of like a normal man is what we're told. So like this man is like 10 feet tall. So like Saris, who is like small, being able to push him back, big deal. Kingfisher appears and he says, "You hurl yourself at the end of that sword like you want to die." And the voice is like so startling to Sarah, she didn't realize he was right there, that she winds up dropping her sword. And he says to her, "I see you've perfected the art of being disarmed." And Renfist is like, "Could you at least pretend to be nice to her?" He doesn't want to. He ignores that. He just has eyes for Saris. And Saris is like, "Are you going to come show me how useless I am with the sword?" Because if you recall, they had the night before at dinner bickered about whether she needed a training sword or whether she could use a real sword. And he wanted her to use a training sword, and she said, "I can use a real sword." And Kingfisher said, "You are not ready for me, human. I don't come with the training mode." Okay? Like, don't you though? You don't train at all? You like, if someone spars with you, you murder them? That's kind of embarrassing. But Kingfisher's purpose here was not actually just to mock Saris, but actually to come grab Ren, because it's time for Ren to give his little speech to the captains. Kingfisher doesn't want to participate at all, but Ren is like, "You have to at least stand there. Like, I'm not going to make you talk, but you have to be present. They know you're here, and like you need to at least show up in the room." So they start walking back into like the main part of camp. People are whispering about Saris as she walks through camp because obviously people are shocked to see like a human girly. It has nothing to do with like Saris herself and just the fact that like she and Carrion are both human. Kingfisher winds up taking her to his quarters, which is this tent on the edge of camp. It has that same sort of magic that the Forge did back at his house, where it's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. It's not quite as nice as his bedroom back home, but it's like pretty like fantastic as far as tents go. It's pretty like luxurious. And Kingfisher has a lunch laid out for them to eat together, since they were supposed to, he's like, "We were supposed to have dinner together alone last night and you kind of messed that up. So I made us lunch together." Kingfisher says to her, "It's just a meal. Let's eat it and try not to draw blood this time, shall we please?" And Saris looks at Kingfisher and she can tell that like he's exhausted. Like clearly the day has been wearing on him. And so she decides not to fight him. And Kingfisher comments on the fact that she like fights fairly well from what he saw with her sparring with Ren. And Sarah says, "I bet you're so shocked, a female human holding her own against a Fae warrior." And Kingfisher says, "No, I knew from the way you moved that you could fight, but Ren was going easy on you." And Sarah says, "You don't think I could have taken him?" And Fisher says, "He wouldn't be the general of this army if you could have. Like, if you, a human girly, could beat him up, like, he would no longer be in charge." Like, that would not be a good look. Like, you are human and he is Fae. So I do need him to be better than you. They spend some time talking about what Fisher like wants from the things between them and like from the war in general, and how he doesn't want power, and how like the humans were never slaves here. And he explains that he needs Saris to obey him because he's responsible for her and he wants to keep her safe, not because he like wants her as his slave. And Saris is like, "Okay, well, the thing is, that probably means our purposes align. Like, I also would like to stay alive. So if you could just tell me why you are asking me to do these things, then you can just ask them. And like, if I agree that it's going to put my life at risk, then I'll probably just like not do them." And Kingfisher is like, "Yeah, but my way is way faster and I like can't afford the risk of you like choosing incorrectly. Like, a lot hangs in the balance. Like, you are very important." And Sarah says, "I want to help you, Fisher. I'll gladly do it. I might not understand your people or even believe that everyone in this realm deserves saving, but that's not my judgment call to make, is it? For some reason, I have this weird ability that can help protect Yavalia from being ravaged by a tide of corrupted, bloodthirsty monsters. I've seen what they're capable of. I know how horrifying they are, and I wouldn't wish them upon anyone. Can't you trust that I..." And during his speech, Kingfisher like loses it, and he starts like black shadows start spilling out of his fingers, and he's just like, it gets a little spooky ooky, as the Shadow Boys like to do. They do like to make shadows appear during spicy times, and that's what happens. He winds up pinning her against the bookshelf, and then he's kissing her, and she's got like her legs wrapped around his waist. I was like, whoa, she's in the air? Okay. They're like fully making out. Like, things are escalating quickly. Like, I mean, he has her pinned against a bookshelf. Her like feet are off the ground. They're fully making out. And Sarah says to Fisher, "I want you." And the moment he says that, the moment she says that, he drops her and it's at the other side of the tent, like, immediately. And Ceres is very, very embarrassed. And I'm, like, confused. I'm, like, confused on how this happened. The, like, transition into the, like, romance from the hatred, like, doesn't totally make sense. And we'll come to learn that, like, there's a magical reason for, like, why they're so drawn to each other. But it just feels a little cuckoo. They're, like, having a conversation. She's like, I want to protect your people. Like, I want to be a good person. I understand that I'm important. And then he's, like, macking on her to the point where they're, like, legs are not on the ground. That's intense. That's intense for, like, just, like, it's like a really quick escalation of things. Anyway, Ceres is, like, very, very embarrassed at how quickly things escalated. And then Fisher looks up at her and then shakes his head, and he takes her hand and he places it on his chest where his heart is, like, thrumming so fast. And he says, I can't trust anything. And then he, like, puts on his cloak and heads out of the tent. And, like, both Ceres and I are left being like, what just happened? I'm so confused. What's going on? Ceres immediately, like, books it out of there and heads out into camp. Even though she doesn't really have any idea of going, she just wanders around for a while, kind of thinking about how freaked out she is by this kiss that she just shared with Fisher. She eventually stumbles across Renfis, and she's like, hey, how are you? And he's like, where the heck is Fisher? And Ceres is like, I'm not sure. And then Renfis smells her, and he's like, hey, are you okay? Like, very clearly, she's stinking like Fisher. And Ceres is like, yeah, of course, like, he didn't do anything. And Ren is like, of course, I wouldn't know him. Fisher would never. He explains that, like, no, I can, like, smell you as well. I can tell that, like, both of you were excited about the prospects of this situation whenever did occur here. I was just like, I wasn't worried that, like, he hurt you. I was worried that you had, something had happened, like, that you were hurt. Like, just because he didn't do anything, like, to hurt you doesn't mean that, like, you're okay. Like, there could be other stuff happening internally. You know? And Ceres is like, no, I'm fine. And then he is like, okay, come with me. We got to go to the meeting. It's meeting time. We're in the war tent. Ryan instructs her to sit near the fire near Carrion. And he's like, the fire should burn off some of the smell of your recent activities. No, everyone at the camp is going to smell this. Like, if Fisher could smell that Carrion had slept with Ceres, like, weeks before he met him, I, like, feel like, I know they don't have really access to water in the third, so, like, it's not like they're showering. I don't know. I don't like to think about the third in the water situation because it actually doesn't make sense to me logistically, but whatever. He's not, like, actively showering a lot or at all, and so that, like, sort of makes sense, but, like, I feel like she'd still be stinky. Like, I feel like there's no way that the smoke is gonna erase his stink. Like, everyone's gonna know. Carrion's eating a quiche, and he offers some to Ceres, and they're, like, sharing this quiche back and forth. And then Carrion and her, like, are chatting in the corner. He's like, some serious stuff's about to go down, and he, like, points out this female warrior, and he's like, that one has been baying for blood. I can't tell what they're whispering about, but one by one, they've all been talking to her. Some of them have been arguing with her, and she punched that one. I think it has to do with Fisher. And then he's like, Ceres, why are you bleeding? And Ceres has, like, a little scratch on her from the, like, heavy making out. And then Ceres is like, what? And Carrion's like, it's just a scratch. You must have caught yourself on something. Just then Kingfisher enters the room. And the woman immediately is like, so it's true, you're alive. And Ren is like, of course he's alive, Danya. We didn't think he was dead. We never thought he was dead. Like, we always knew he was alive. Kingfisher is, like, dripping wet. Danya comments on it. She's like, what the heck are you doing? Apparently he, like, took a quick bath after Ceres left his tent. Danya is like annoyed that Kingfisher hasn't gone so long, and now he's being, like, super weird now that he's been back, because they know that he was at camp last week, but he was trying to be, like, sneaky about it. Like, he was sneaking around camp and, like, not making himself, like, a public entity. Danya talks about how they have been, like, suffering. Like, this war has been going on for, like, 100 years without Kingfisher, and it has been just, like, miserable, and, like, where has he been? And then she threatens him. And one of the other captains says to her, careful, Danya, I might let you land a hit on me for fun, but if you're out of your mind, if you think I'll let you open the commander's throat. And Danya says he's not our commander. He sacrificed that title when he abandoned us. And then Ren is like, Fisher, just tell them what happened, and I'm sure they'll understand as soon as. And Fisher is like, no, I'm sorry, I truly am. I didn't want to leave any of you back at Gil 3. I wish I could go back and tell you why I had to go, but I can't. All that I can say is that I had no other choice. And Danya's like, it was Belkin, wasn't it? He forced you to go. And Kingfisher's like, I literally cannot tell you. I wish I could, but I can't. I returned as soon as I could, believe me. And Danya shouts at him, traitor, and then she jumps at him with her sword drawn. And Ceres decides to, like, get in the middle of it. I don't know why. Like, this girl has a sword, and this guy is, like, a fey magic warrior. Like, one, I think he can defend himself. And two, She's a sword. And you have nothing. But anyway, she does have her magic powers. That moment, she, like, really channels her alchemy powers, and Danya's sword, like, splinters itself, and all the splinters embed themselves into the stone wall that's behind Ren. I don't know why there's a stone wall in a tent, but there is. Okay, don't ask questions about that. Danya turns towards her and is like, we have an alchemist, and Fisher says, she's mine. But before anyone can discuss any further, there's cries that come from outside, shouting for icebreakers, and everyone jumps into action. And Sarah is like, hey, what's going on? And Lawrence, one of the captains, tells her, do not leave this tent. I mean it. And Carrion is like, hey, no, but what is happening? And Lawrence explains to him, Sansaroth, the enemy's at the riverbank. The ice must be broken. The dead cannot cross. And so they head out to the river where the river has, like, frozen over. Saras and Carrion obviously don't listen. They immediately head outside too, because why would they listen? And Saras is like, we should stay out of the way. Yeah, you should go back in the tent where you were told to go. But they don't listen. Carrion doesn't seem to be listening to her at all, because he doesn't want to hide while they're in danger. Like, he wants to help save the camp. And Carrion says, I might not be able to match them in a fight, but I can break the ice. And anyway, it turns out my ex can make shrapnel out of swords, so I reckon we're going to be just fine. And Sarah says, 1, I'm not your ex, and 2, I don't know how I did that, so I don't know if I could do it again. And then we, like, look downriver, and we can see that there are these, like, giant guys that have these giant hammers that are trying to, like, literally just, like, sledgehammer through the ice to, like, the beat of the drum. And then on the other side of the river, they can see this just, like, mass of dark figures, and Hrothgar explains that that's the Sensothian horde with 50,000 vampires who will storm the camp if the ice isn't broken. And Carrion says, okay, so are we going to break it in time? And Saras is like, I don't know. We need to help. Not that they really can offer much help. They're, like, both very small humans, and they're, like, literal giants. Giants. I can't explain to you. I think they're trolls in my depiction. But, like, I want to tell you, they're, like, giants. I think they're described as, like, being, like, 4 or 5 times the height of a regular human. And they have, like, giant hammers, and they're trying to break this ice. I don't, like, truly don't know what Saras and Carrion are going to do. Go, blow on it? I don't know, but they want to help. And then the whole thing shatters, finally. The ice does break, and the vampires that had started to venture onto the ice immediately, like, get plunged into the freezing ice water below. And Saras explains that it wasn't actually the giant guys with their hammers that had broken it, but Fisher's magic that had managed to crack the ice. Then a guy calls out from across the river, and he says, good evening, Kingfisher. I'm so glad you came out and decided to play. Won't you say hello? And the woman, then, like, a random woman at camp says, is that Malcolm? He's come out of his fortress to taunt the commander. And Malcolm... I think that woman was just there mostly to tell us that, like, this is Malcolm. Hey, guys, this is Malcolm. Malcolm says, come on, Fisher. Won't you show yourself? I will, if that's what you're waiting for. I know you're over there. It's only been a couple of weeks since we last spoke, but what can I say? I miss you. The implication is clear that, like, maybe Kingfisher has spent these 100 years, like, with Malcolm, like, in cahoots with the enemy, and, like, clearly Malcolm is saying this to sow some seeds of discontent. But also, like, if he actually had been partnered up with Malcolm, I don't think Malcolm would be like, buddy, because that would obviously, like, rat him out. Like, I feel like people should get the implication that, like, obviously Kingfisher was somehow, like, trapped by Malcolm. You know? But maybe they really don't like Kingfisher around here. He is kind of rude and annoying often. I wouldn't blame them. And Malcolm continues, fine, have it your way, darling. Hide behind your little friends. I'll be seeing you soon. Very evil villain. You know, he's classic evil villain. Then everyone kind of disperses. The ice is broken for the night. Like, Malcolm leaves. We're done. We did our activity for the evening. Saras is, like, chilling outside of the work tent drinking some hot cider when Fisher comes to find her. She's chilling with Ren and Carrion. And Fisher is like, take my hand or I'm going to carry you. Like, you're coming with me. And then he tells Ren that they'll be back in the morning, and he takes her through a shadow gate back to a bedroom at his house. And Onyx growls at them when they land. Onyx was not expecting them, and he's, like, a little annoyed that they left him alone all day long. And he takes off her cloak for her, and he says, you never wore the dresses I put out for you. And Sarah says, like, well, I don't want to talk about dresses right now. Let's not talk about why I love to wear pants and not dresses. She loves to wear pants and dresses. Every girl in one of these books, except our beloved Selena Sarthothian, loves a pant. They're like, ew, dresses. Only Selena knows that a dress is gorge. I guess Feyre is, like, cool with a dress, too. Like, she doesn't wear a dress in the regs, but, like, she wears them and she doesn't whine about it. Fisher says, fair enough, let's talk about food then. Don't share food with that little prick again, little Asha. Back in the war room, you were trading cake with him back and forth. And Sarah, the quiche, Sarah is like, it wasn't cake. And Fisher's like, I don't care what it was. Like, just do not share food with him. And Sarah is like, does sharing food, like, mean something particular to the Fae? And Fisher's like, no, but I just, like, don't like it. Like, I don't like it. Like, you can share food with Ren, you can share food with anyone else, but, like, do not share food with Carrion. And Sarah wants to talk to Fisher, obviously, about what she just saw on the riverbank. And Fisher's like, no, I brought you here so we could forget about the riverbank. Then Fisher points out that Sarah was worried about him in that war room. And she lies and says it was because she was worried he would die and she'd never be able to get home again. And then she says, they're going to tear you to shreds when you go back in the morning. And Fisher's like, I'll be fine. And Sarah says, aren't you a little concerned that your so-called friends are going to be thinking that you helped that Malcolm guy? And Kingfisher is like, no. And he talks her down and explains that the vampires like sometimes make it almost like halfway across the river because Malcolm likes to remind them of like the impending threat, but they always break the ice and everything goes back to normal. Sarah's kind of asks about the politics of the situation in terms of like the Malcolm and Kingfisher of it all, and like what will this do in terms of his leadership. And Fisher's like, don't worry about it, like Faye lived too long to hold grudges. And Sarah asks then, why was Malcolm different? He was nothing like those feeders. And Fisher explains, Malcolm is a high Fae vampire. The very first. We were cursed thousands of years ago. The Fae turned into something very much like Malcolm. When a cure was found, my great-grandfather and most of the other Yevelian Fae took it. They were horrified by the monsters they'd become and wanted to return to their old lives. There were those who liked the dark magic that the curse afforded them. They liked the power and the promise of immortality. And then she asks, aren't the Fae already immortal? And Fisher explained, no, little Osha, we are not. Our lifespans are the subject of much research and conjecture. We outlive your kind by a long, long time. But we age. Eventually we die. There were those like Malcolm who didn't want to age. They weren't content to make the most out of the thousands of years they had already been granted. So they took what was supposed to be a punishment and embraced it with open arms. Malcolm is the strongest of them. Their king. All of the Fae who choose to remain vampires. He is alone strong enough to fully turn someone and ensure they remain themselves. What makes them who they are, their personality and their character traits. When his princes bite and turn someone, their victims die and return without their souls, nothing more than mindless, hungry shells. They obey their masters and they feed. Kingfisher explains that like a lot of Malcolm's horde actually like used to be human and that they had no way to protect themselves without magic, and so they were like fairly easily turned because they had no way to defend themselves. And Sarah says, you were with him, aren't you, for all those years that you were missing? And Fisher says, I can't tell you that. And Sarah realizes that he must be bound to Malcolm in some way. He must have made an oath in a similar way that she made an oath to him. And he like physically cannot tell her. And she like expresses that and like thinks that he'll be excited that she's like figured it out. And instead he goes, stop. Have you considered that I might not want to tell you because it's none of your business? Sarah's like, no, okay. Actually, she says, it's my business because whatever happens to you affects me. And then they discuss whether he actually hates her, and he explains that he can hate her and still want to sleep with her because like clearly there's like chemistry between them. And Sarah says like, no, there is like something between us. Like I feel like there's more than just like a physical chemistry. And he denies it, but they end up making out again and things escalate, clothes come off. And honestly, once again, I am confused how we got here. They're like so mean to each other all the time, and then they're like in bed together. And I'm like, okay. It's kind of a lot. Like the transition is hard. Once we're in the romance, love it. I'm so on board. But like the first half, he's so mean, and we eventually get an explanation for it. Although I don't love it. We'll talk about it when we get to it. But like, I don't know how girly Pop ends up in his bed. Like, have some self-respect. While they're hooking up, his tattoos do move from his skin onto hers. Kind of crazy behavior. After they finish, he asks her to stay there overnight and he'll come get her in the morning because the camp will be in chaos and he has a bunch of stuff to do. Not that she really has a choice because he like pretty immediately like pieces out and tells her to get some sleep. She's surprised to find she's not locked into Kingfisher's room. Archer is just outside the door. He explains he'd heard people in Fisher's room, and so he had like come over and he had noticed Onyx like waiting outside the door, and he heard what was happening in there, and he decided to wait to see if they needed anything because he's, as he says, intimate relations can be very strenuous. And Sarah says like, we weren't doing anything like that. We were actually just moving the furniture around. But I know it's back in where it was because we moved it. Fisher didn't like it, so we had to move it back. No. And Archer's like, okay, sure. Do you want some apple juice anyway to refresh you? And she does take it because she did want some juice. In the morning, there's a shadow gate in her room, and Sarah realizes that Kingfisher isn't coming to to pick her up, but she'll be expected to just like walk through the shadow gate, take herself back to camp. She has some questions for him now that she's like looked at herself in the mirror and realized that she's covered in his tattoos. Like this was not a thing that just happened temporarily while they were hooking up, but like these tattoos seem to be like a permanent new feature for her. She emerges from the gate and she catches Kingfisher like quickly walking away from her. And she's like, hey, would you care to explain like what the hell just happened to me? Like, why am I covered in your tattoos? And Kingfisher's like, don't worry, it'll fade probably. Bye. And Sarah says like, I did not ask for a tattoo, Fisher. I definitely didn't ask for a bird to be permanently inked right above my boob. You need to take it back. And Fisher's like, well, it doesn't really work like that. And Sarah says, like, it came from the ink on your body. You touched me. It slipped from your skin onto mine. I don't know. Shake hands with me or something and take it back. And Kingfisher is like, it's a tattoo, Osha. It won't kill you. Just forget it's even there. Or you could even, like, get it covered up. And then he's like, okay, let's go to the camp healer. And she's like, why? And he's like, you need something to like make sure you don't get pregnant after last night. And Sarah explains that she was sterilized when she was 14, along with most of the other girls in the ward. That Queen Medara has a like rule that says 7 out of every 10 girls that are born are like sterilized to like limit the population growth in the third ward. And so she was one of the 70% of women in the third ward who are sterilized. So she doesn't need to worry about birth control because she can't have kids. And Fisher is like justifiably horrified by this. He like tries to like play it cool, but obviously like this is like horrific information to be told. And he sends her to the forge to work, and he says, I expect to report by lunchtime. She heads to the camp forge. It is like pretty cute and well stocked. It's smaller than the forge at Fisher's house, but like still in good shape. The fire is already raging when she gets there. Everything is set up and ready for her to go. Kingfisher has once again hidden the quicksilver that she will need, and she has to listen for its whisper and then follow that sound. She follows it to Carrion, who's sitting like not far from the tent, kind of in the camp. And Sarah says, you've been so chill with all this Fae stuff since you've arrived here. Like, this is kind of like shocking to her. And Carrion's like, yeah, well, I like knew the Fae were real because my grandmother had always told me about them. And he explains that she had a book called Fae Creatures of the Gilarian Mountains. And the note at the front said, never forget that monsters thrive best in the dark. Commit all you read here to memory. Prepare for war. With 2 exclamation points. And he said, my grandmother is a very serious lady. And like, if she put 2 exclamation points, like that meant like she was serious about it. This was no joke. Like, we needed to take the Fae seriously. And so he was like, I knew this was kind of coming. Like, I've been preparing for this my whole life to some extent. And then Carrion gives her the little wooden box that Fisher had given him to hold on to. And Saris recruits him to help her in the forge because he like really doesn't have anything better to do. And Saris does her like 3 daily experiments. All of them fail yet again. They're taking a late lunch after they finish their 3 experiments. They've got to go back in the afternoon to purify the silver again. I forget what it's called. And they're sitting outside eating their lunches when Fisher comes by, and he's like, why aren't you guys working? And Sarah says, like, since we're not slaves, we're taking a break to eat. Look, 2 plates and everything. And I've done everything I can for the day. And Fisher was like, okay, what happened with the trials you ran? And Sarah says, like, what do you think happened? And then she asks him why he continues to hide this quicksilver from her. Like, why is this something that he does? It like feels like a waste of time when like time is not something they really have, it seems like. And Fisher says, God forbid I make your day a little more interesting. Also, it's good practice. You never know when you might need to detect small amounts of quicksilver at like great distances. Like, I like want to make sure as an alchemist, like you really can talk to the quicksilver well. And then he asks if there are any more trials planned for the afternoon, and Saris explains no, that they have to refine. There's the word, refine the silver. And Fisher tells Carrion that he needs to leave. And Saris is like, why? He's been helping me all afternoon. Fisher like tells Carrion to go find a task from Ren because like otherwise he's gonna have him cleaning the toilets. Like, get out of here. And Carrion is like, you were extra miserable today. You should really get laid. Might help improve your mood. Tell him, Sunshine. Fisher's like, don't call her Sunshine. And Carrion's like, why not? And Fisher says, because she is moonlight. The mist that shrouds the mountains, the bite of electricity in the air before a storm, the smoke that rolls across a battlefield before the killing starts. You have no idea what she is, what she could be. You should call her Majesty. Okay? This is such unhinged behavior. Like, can you imagine if this happened in real life? To a man you had hooked up with one time? You would be confused. I don't know how she doesn't just, like, giggle this whole time. Like, what the hell? Like, I guess it's nice, but, like, it's not like he was calling her, like, garbage. He was calling her Sunshine. It's like a cute, sweet little nickname. Calm down, Fisher. Anyway, Sarah says, did you need something, Fisher, or we get back to work? And Fisher says, you're done here for the day. I'll send someone else to refine the silver. There are plenty of other smiths who can do that kind of work around camp. Unfortunately, there's something else I need from you, Osha. And Fisher takes her back to the war room tent, and Wren is like standing under the shards with a couple other captains, and they're just kind of like looking at the shards. Wren explains there are 563 of them. One of our metal workers tried to pull them out with forceps, but they're so fine he couldn't grip them properly. 2 of them snapped. The ends are still buried inside the stone. It's not good. Both Wren and Fisher kind of look like pretty badly beaten up, like they're both like bruised and bleeding a little bit, and clearly something happened at training, like they went a little too hard. Which, as we should have expected. Fisher told us yesterday that he has no training mode, so he was actually just beating the crap out of Wren. And Lorith says Fisher was in a bad mood when Sarah's asked about, like, what the heck is happening. Sarah says, like, why don't we just get a new sword? Like, why don't we just leave these shards in here and get Danya a new sword? Wren explains, Danya's sword was special. It used to be imbued with magic like Nimmerel. It was a precious Fey heirloom, Danya's birthright, a god sword forged by the ancient Alchemerian masters. Such swords are religious icons to the Fae. It represented Danya's rank and marked her as an original member of the Lupo Paralia. And Sarah says, like, what is the Lupo Paralia? And Wren says, Kingfisher's wolves. There are 8 of us typically, although our numbers have been reduced as of late. We fight as a team, working together just as wolves do. I'm sure you've noticed the wolf on some of our armor. So it's kind of like a rank, essentially, like the 8 top warriors that like are working directly under Kingfisher. Wren then explains, anyway, we can't just throw out the shards. It would be super disrespectful. And Sarah says, amazing. So you're saying that I was in camp for less than 5 minutes and I destroyed an ancient weapon that has a profound cultural importance for all of Fae kind? And Danya says she doesn't even care. She doesn't even care. Like, why is she being so rude and disrespectful? Okay, and this is where I like made a note, because this like really clocked to me reading this through and kind of like detail this time, is that there are very few female characters in this book, and the only ones that are like cool are Sarys and Everlayne. So far, those are the only nice women we've met in this whole book. And the other women that we meet are like Queen Madara, evil. Danya is like the worst in like every single scene, and it's like not like that like it can't happen. Like, I love a mean lady. Danya is not treated as like a mean lady who's also like good. She is treated just like as like mean and kind of has like a bad attitude and is like not a team player. And I just don't love that. There are like so many men, there are so many like good men, and there are just like so few women. I don't really know what my point is in pointing that out. I don't think like Callie Hart did anything malicious here. I don't think this is like a message against women. I just like sometimes I think we have to be aware of those things and go, that's interesting. Why aren't there more like female friendships in any of these romantasy books? To be honest, a female friendship is hard to come by, but I think this one in particular, we're like really shown no women, kind of like all the good people in the book are men. Like we have like Fisher and Wren and Lorith like in this actual scene, but like Carrion, although like an annoying guy, is like a good guy. Like he kind of serves as like a counterpoint to Danya, but like Danya is painted as like truly only causing problems, and Carrion is like fairly helpful, and like although he makes like crass jokes and things, like seems nice. We have like Elroy, who's like her mentor, Hayden, who she like wants to like take care of and is close to, Archer, this like servant who is like so kind to her. Like we have like a lot of like kind, good men, and I just am like, it feels a little strange to me that there are like substantially less like kind women, and like Everlayne, the like nice woman from like the only other like nice girl, is like not really even in this half of the book. I mean, we'll see Everlayne later, but like she's not in it as like a friend to Sarys. And I just like, that is always something I like want to make a note of and go like, I just want to be curious about it. Where are the girlies? Where are the girlies? Anyway, Danya is like super annoyed and super bad attitude, which she always is, about the fact that a human girl has had such a bad attitude to a high-born fae like her. And she says to Fisher, like, you wouldn't let me talk to you like that. And Fisher says, there's not much I can do about the way Sarys talks to you. She is not a member of my army, and I'm not her superior. And then Sarys starts to listen to the shards, and she realizes that the sword was imbued with quicksilver, which is why it listened to her, why it broke into shards in the first place. Kingfisher explains that, like, it was common practice to imbue swords with quicksilver back in the time of alchemists because it made the weapons more powerful. Alchemists could control metals that had at least 5% quicksilver, although there is no record of any weapon ever being, like, shattered to shards like this. And Lorith says, that makes you the most powerful alchemist ever recorded, capable of changing how we've been fighting this war in ways that most of us can't even imagine. Most of us were infants when the paths between realms closed and the alchemists became extinct. Some of us hadn't even been born yet. We had no idea what battlefields used to look like with an alchemist in the camp ready to forge new weapons that could draw magic. And Sarah says, like, hey, I don't actually know how to do any of this. Let's maybe rethink that strategy. And Ren says, no, we won't, because every day our numbers decline and Malcolm's horde grows larger. There's no game left to hunt here. Belkian isn't sending supplies to the front anymore. We have no wood for our fires, no food to fuel the troops, no clothes to keep them warm, no weapons to arm them. So yes, I'll support a plan where a human magically shows up and helps us turn the tide of this thing, because without her, we'll all be drowned soon enough. And I'm not even talking about in another 100 years, or even another 50, or even 10. We have 1 year, Danya. 12 months. If we don't figure this thing out by this time next year, Malcolm will have won. Okay. Really bad news. Saris winds up like leaving, and she is outside just like sitting with Lorith, and she's like essentially like hyperventilating. She's having a hard time breathing. She's like a little stressed out on all the pressure that has just been placed upon her by Ren and everything that Ren has said about how like essentially the weight of the war is resting on her shoulders. And Lorith says to her, you get used to the impending sense of doom after a while. And Sarah says, where is Fisher? And Lorith says he went back to Cahlish to go see Taladaius, the healer. And Sarah says, okay, where can I get a drink? And he takes her to the tavern. The war camp does have a tavern at like the center of camp. It's in one of the permanent buildings. And we like cut to Sarah's 5 drinks in, and she's feeling a lot better. Turns out. And she says, she's like talking and she's drunk. And she says, at the end of the day, Fisher is a liar. And Lorith is like, he literally cannot lie. He's an oath-bound fae. And he explains that there are like 2 types of fae. He says, when you turn 21, you get a choice. You can bleed on the stone, the Furin stone, and make a vow to always be truthful, to be bound to our word no matter what it costs us. Or they can choose to be a lawless fae who may like lie, steal, and cheat. And Lorith assures her that if Kingfisher had made any sort of oath to her, even if he hadn't been bound to it by like the rules of magic, that he'd uphold it anyway, because like he's a good guy. He's a good guy. And I have to start to question, like, is he though? Because like, you know, sometimes like if it quacks like a duck. And I would say he does not talk like a good guy. And then Saris asks him, Fisher said your teeth were the remnant of a blood curse, right? But they still work. Can you use them to drink blood? And Lorith is like, that's not really a conversation you should be having in the middle of a tavern. Drinking blood is very taboo and very Scandi. Because like, it's a sex thing. Because like drinking blood is almost always a sex thing. Like it is. He says, if you have more questions about it, you should ask in private to the person that you maybe want to do it with. Like, don't ask random people in bars about it, okay? Not very appropriate. And Sarah's like, okay, for sure, I didn't realize. And then Sarah's like swiftly changes the topic to Lorith and how he like ended up in this war. And he explains that he was a singer and Fisher had found him in a ditch after he had gotten attacked by vampires. And Lorith would have died if Fisher hadn't helped him. Fisher gave him a piece of his soul. It's an ancient rite, but Fisher's father had almost died once and a friend had saved him using it and made sure Fisher knew how to do this like ritual. And Sarah is confused because like at that point, like Lorith would have been a complete stranger to Fisher. He like stumbled across him in the road. And Lorith explains, yes, a stranger, and Fisher did it anyway. He bonded a small part of himself to that scrap of life that was clinging on inside of me. And that was that. I was still sick as a dog, but death loosened its grip on me. I knew I was going to live, and so did Kingfisher. He told me that he was leaving to find other wolves, and that he'd be back in 3 months. He said I could go as soon as I was feeling better, if that's what I wanted to do. But there was a place for me here as well. I preferred that idea instead. And so Lorith stayed and has like been working on has worked since then to like become a warrior worthy of the gift that Fisher granted him. And then he explains that because of this, like the fact that he has a piece of Fisher's soul, if Lorith dies first, that like piece of soul just goes back to Fisher. No skin off of his back. But if Fisher dies first, he won't cross over to the other side. He'll just like float around as a ghost and like wait for Lorith to die. Like that's the sacrifice he's made, is he's kind of like delayed the afterlife because he won't be able to interact with people here. He's a ghost that can't interact. He'll just like be stuck. And then Lorith tells the story of Saoirse, a queen of the Lycian Fae, whose mother saved her when she was a child. And he talks about how the fact that when Saoirse was a child, her mother saved her by giving her a piece of her soul. And now she's been alive for nearly 3,000 years, extending her life by tonics, all the while her mother's spirit has been waiting. And Saoirse would like to live like to live forever. Lorith looked sick to his stomach. I had to admit, I felt a little sick myself. The idea that someone could condemn their own mother to such a lonely, awful existence, as well as the inevitable madness was sure to set in, was incomprehensible to me. I'm sorry, that's like crazy. Like, what the hell do they expect her to do? Like, her mother gave her child a gift. Gorgeous. The Fae, it's not like she lives to 3,000 and normally she'd have like a human lifespan. Like, we know that like Fisher and Everlayne are like fairly young in terms of the Fae, and they're like, but like I think a little less than 2,000 years old. Like, so it doesn't seem like she's ancient. I understand like maybe living forever is kind of a bad idea, but like, do they expect her to go off herself? It seems like at 3,000 you could still very well be alive in terms of Fae. Her mother gave her this gift. Is she supposed to like just like die? I just like don't really know what they expect from this like queen to do. It like does seem reasonable that she lives to 3,000. Maybe her goal shouldn't be living forever, but like if we wanted to paint her as like really horrific, maybe we should have made her like 20,000 years old. And even that seems like reasonable. The Fae, we're going to assume that the Fae on the regs live to about 5,000 at least, based on the fact that like Fisher and Everlayne seem like they're in their like mid-20s at like 1,700 years old. I don't know. I think Saoirse's in the right here. Maybe I'm on the wrong side of history, but I do think Saoirse is fine. Anyway, Lorith goes on to say, Fisher says he's not worried about what happens to him if he dies first. And I'm not worried either. The truth is I plan on dying first anyway. But if the fates guide the stars in a different direction and our better angels claim him first, I won't permit a single breath in my body beyond the last one Fisher takes. By my own hand, I'll make sure the pieces of the soul he loaned to me finds its way back to him. And if the fates consider it just, and I've earned enough to earn a place at his side, I'll go quietly and happily with my brother into whatever lies beyond. One thing about me that you can always count on is I hate a magical death pact. I hate them. They show up in so many romantasy books and I always hate them. Oh my gosh. And this one's not even forcing Lorith to die. He's just like, I'm gonna die. I think Kingsit Fisher can hang out for a couple years. In the ghost realm. It does seem like a little boring, but like it'd be like the best TV show. It like does seem like you can watch what's going on. Are you just like stuck in your body? That does seem a little worse. But also like he knew what he was signing up for. I don't know. I don't think Lorith should try to live forever, but I don't think he needs to off himself immediately. I don't like it. I hate a death pact. That night, Kingfisher takes her back to his home, and he, like, barely talks to her as he, like, takes her very, very drunk little booty home. In the morning, she wakes up with a splitting headache and Onyx licking her face, and the room is empty. Kingfisher does not come for her in the morning or at all the next day, and she just, like, hangs around the estate. And then the morning after, she's like a little freaked out when Kingfisher still isn't there, and she's getting like really anxious, like trying to figure out like what she's supposed to do if he never shows back up, when he shows up mid-afternoon and he says to her, "You're wearing my shirt." And she says, "There's nothing else to wear. All the clothes from the room I had with Carrion are gone. Archer showed me to the other room, another room down the hall, but that one was full of dresses, and I think we both know how I feel about those." And Fisher comments on the fact that her shirt is too big for her, and then Saris is like, "What happened?" And Fisher explains that they had to deal with a pack of feeders on the northern border, but it was like just a little tussle, not a huge deal. He's like, fine, but that's what he was dealing with yesterday. He needs to go see a healer today, and then he will come back and get her. But they aren't going to the war camp today. He has something else he wants to show her. And Saris is like a little weirded out by the idea of just like having no idea where Fisher is going to take her. But Fisher is like, you know what? If it'll make you feel better, you can even bring Onyx with you. So Onyx gets to come on their little field trip. They step out of the shadow gate and into a clearing with these like bright lights hanging all around them. And there are a bunch of people like cooking, and Onyx like wants down, and Fisher assures her that like Onyx will be fine. He can like wander around and take care of himself. And it's a feast day at a lovely little village called Ballard. Fisher buys them drinks, and Saris like realizes that like, oh, this place is like lovely. She thinks to herself, this place was the home. The residents of Ballard weren't oppressed. No one was looming over them, threatening them with death if they didn't fall into line. The food and water they needed to survive weren't rationed to the point they didn't know if they would make it from one day to the next. And there was no war here. No vampire, no Malcolm, no Belkin. Sarah says, this is what I wanted from Hayden when he was little. Somewhere safe and peaceful. Somewhere where he could have thrived. And Fisher says he could still thrive. Sounds like Swift got him a good job and a place to live. And Sarah says, oh, if only that could be enough to tame Hayden. My brother ran wild as a child. He's basically feral. He's also got a crippling gambling addiction that has already earned him 4 broken bones. If I ever make it home, it'll be a miracle if he's still alive. And Fisher promises her that she will make it home. And Sarah says, I still have to turn out thousands of rings into relics, and I fear that might be a lifetime of work. And Fisher says, I'm going to help you with that. Like, we'll make it work. And then Star starts to ask about, like, the children and aging, because she sees, like, a lot of Fae children running around, and she realizes, like, she doesn't really know how that process works since they, like, age so differently than humans. Fisher says a child is vulnerable, weaker than an adult, too liable to be picked off by predators. Our offspring actually age twice as fast as human children. We're fully grown by 21 or 22. That's when the aging process slows down dramatically. I don't understand how they age twice as fast as human children, but also they're fully grown when they're 21, because I would say that's pretty similar to humans. I don't understand. The math on that does not make sense to me, but okay. We'll take your word on it, Kingfisher. And Sarah says, like, predators. And Kingfisher says, plenty of dark, hungry things lurk in the forgotten corners of this realm, little Osha. At least 4 different kinds of banshee feed from the souls of the very young, their vibrant energy just too potent for them to resist. Then there are the wraiths, the sawtooth mermaids, and a whole plethora of den-dwelling creatures that like to burst out of the ground and swallow whole anything they can fit inside their jaws. You're really going to have to watch where you're putting your feet around here. Also, there are poisonous thorns and carnivorous flower buds, and Malcolm. His hatred alone would wipe the world clean of life if it were given free reign. And then Sarah comments on a group of fae women who seem to be like ogling Fisher, and she says, I think this little group might be wondering if the Lord of Cahlish is in the market for a Lady of Cahlish. And Kingfisher says, I am not the Lord of Cahlish. A lord is charged with watching over his people. He protects them, defends them. Do you know where they are now? The people who used to live on my lands? On the wrong side of the Darn, baying for the blood of their own children. Or they've moved away. I left them for 110 years. Ren tried to protect them, but I failed them. I am lord of nothing. And like Sarah feels like really bad. There's this like complete vulnerability with Fisher that she has not really seen up until this point, and it like is really changing her perspective on him. And Fisher says, why haven't you brought up what happened between us the other night? And Sarah says, you made it very clear it was supposed to be a one-time thing. You have made it very clear that you could hate me and still want to sleep with me. And I'm not the type of person who keeps throwing herself at things that hurt her. What would have been the point? And Fisher says, I don't hate you, but there are things that make it impossible for me. But before they can kind of finish up that conversation, an older woman interrupts them saying, bless the stars, I was right. Kingfisher sightings are very rare around these parts. And Fisher like forces a smile as he sees this woman. He goes, evening, Wendy. And Wendy says, evening, Wendy. Don't you evening, Wendy me. I've been making you those cursed biscuits for you every year, and you haven't bothered to show up and eat them. No one else likes them, you cheeky shit. What a waste of ingredients. And Fisher says, I'm sorry, Wind. I've been terribly rude. I owe you an apology. And Wendy says, you owe me money. Do you know how expensive sugar is these days? And Fisher laughs. And Sarah sings, when I picked up a pitcher at the Winter Palace and filled a glass for myself for the first time, I thought the sound of that rushing, free water would be my favorite sound until the day I died. I was wrong. The sound of Fisher's genuine laugh was rarer than water had ever been back in Zulvarin, and almost brought tears to my eyes to hear. Fisher says, I'll see what I can do about getting those trade routes opened again. And Wendy says, don't bother. Traders bring too much bad news with their wares these days. And then she tells Kingfisher to come with her because he needs to eat, and she's got enough beef stew for both of them. And then she asks for an introduction. And Sarah starts to introduce herself, and Wendy immediately knows she's a Zulvarin, and she smells her and is like, more than just a companion then. And Fisher says she's just a friend. She'll be headed back to Zulvarin soon. And Wendy doesn't seem to believe him, probably because she stinks like they've been sleeping together. But Fisher is like, back to the food, and Wendy takes them back to where she's got a little setup. She feeds them, filling their bowls again and again until they can't move. And Sarah is like a little tipsy because Wendy just like made sure her glass was never empty. And Fisher is drinking too. And Sarah is kind of surprised because she would have thought that he would want to keep his wits about him at any moment. Just then a little pixie girlie is trying to snatch one of Sarah's cookies, but Sarah takes it from her, explaining that it's too large for her to carry. She breaks it into little pieces for her. And she looks back over at Fisher, and he's just like watching her. And she says to him, are you about to smile, Kingfisher of the Ajin Gate? And he says, what if I am? He said in a very even, measured tone. I can count on one hand, this is Sarah. I can count on one hand how many times I've witnessed you do it. No one's going to believe me when we get back to camp. He did smile then, slow and rueful. Head turned away as he toyed with his fork. They'll believe you, little Osha. They've all seen me smile plenty. Just not recently, I whispered. No, not recently. Smiling has been pretty hard of late. His Adam apple bobbed. It's getting easier, though. My note here says, who is this guy? I literally do not know him. Body Snatchers took the evil boy from the first half of the book and gave us this nice man. This nice young man. Where has he been? Maybe HR had a talking to him, and they said, we're going to have to fire you. We're going to have to fire you if you keep making these weird comments to the new girl. Could you be nice? Because now he's being so sweet. Smiling's a little bit easier these days. That's a cute thing to say. They're both relaxing and like just chilling and hanging out when Sarah hears that like the Quicksilver like talking to her. It goes a Northrath more, repeating again and again. And she's gripping the edge of the table, unable to like catch her breath over the sound. It's like so overwhelming. And Wendy is like, Sarah, darling, can you hear me? Are you all right? And she comes back to her body, and her plate and her biscuits are all over the ground, and she's like clearly had like kind of had a little bit of a fit, and everyone around her is staring at her. And Sarah's like, oh, I'm fine. Sorry, everyone. No big deal. And Kingfisher knows something has happened, and he's like, hey, you know what? It's been a long day. I think we've eaten and drunk too much. The exhaustion is starting to set in. We're going to head out. And Wendy's like, do you know where you're going? And Kingfisher says, the rest of me might not be perfect, but my memory is. And they head out, Onyx following with a biscuit in his mouth. Sarah is surprised when Kingfisher doesn't summon a shadow gate, but he like leads her on this path. And once they're like a good distance from the festivities into the forest, Fisher asks her, those words you said back there, why did you say them? Sarah realizes she'd said them out loud. She hadn't realized. And she says, I don't know. I really don't. It came out of nowhere. I was sitting there listening to you say something about smiling, and then bam, it was all I could hear. A Northrath more, a Northrath more, a Northrath. And Fisher is like, hey, stop. Like, don't say that. It's just, please don't say that. And Sarah says, the Quicksilver pushed those words into my mind when you forced me to hold it back at the Winter Palace. What do they mean? And Fisher says, it's better if you don't ask. I can't tell you anyway, so just don't. And they continue on. The trees are full of these like twinkling lights and these like cute little benches and ponds. Like the village is just like so cute. Eventually they reach like a little town square with a fountain at the center. And Kingfisher is like walking quickly. He's like clearly like pretty distressed still from what happened in the square. And Sarah's kind of like trips trying to keep up with him. And she like glances at the statue that's like part of the fountain, in the fountain, near the fountain. I don't know. And at the plaque, there's a plaque at the bottom of the statue, and then she looks at the statue itself, and it looks a lot like Everlayne. Like, they are incredibly, like, similar features, this statue and Everlayne. And the plaque reads, Adina of the Seven Towers, Lady of Cahlish. It's their mom. It's Everlayne and Kingfisher's mother. Meanwhile, Kingfisher is headed up to this like building with a bright red door, and he has a key. Clearly, this is a place that him and his mother came when he was young, and it's like important to him even now. They head inside. The apartment is covered in dust, and furniture and paintings are like covered with sheets, like it's clearly not regularly used. And Sarah goes to like start uncovering things, and Fisher says, "No, not now." And he's like, "Let's go to bed." And he sends her to one of the bedrooms, and he takes another. Sarah has not been sleeping for very long when she wakes to a screaming. She jumps out of bed. It's pitch dark. She immediately stubs her toe. She doesn't know where she is. She like just kind of got into bed, so she doesn't know her way around this apartment. She just has to follow the sound of Fisher's room to get to him, and she winds up in his bedroom. His curtains are open, and he's lit by moonlight, just laying shirtless on his bed. She expected to see him asleep, like having a nightmare of some sort, but like he is wide awake, staring at the ceiling, tears like leaking down his cheeks. And Sarah says like, Fisher? And he's like, go. And she's like, what's wrong? And Fisher starts like almost like seizing, but he continues to tell her like, don't worry, it'll pass in an hour or two. And she's like, should I get you a healer? And he says, no, please just like get me some water. That'll help. And then like go back to bed, go back to sleep. Like I can deal with this myself. She picks through the apartment to find like a glass for water. And then she finds like a random pitcher of water on the counter. This is confusing. I guess this is like the workaround about like plumbing, but like they didn't bring water in. Like, where did this pitcher of water come from? Fisher went and got a pitcher of water before they went to bed. Like, what? Where did the water come from? Whatever. Just make plumbing happen. She heads back to Fisher's room, and Onyx is literally like curled against Fisher because he's literally an angel sent from heaven. Anytime there's like a dog or like some sort of like fun pet in these romantasy books, angels from heaven, gorgeous things. Sarah says to him, can you lift your head? And Fisher's like, no, I'll drink it later, just like set it on the nightstand. And she's like, I will help you. I'm not gonna just leave you here, you stupid. She climbs up in his bed, like helps him like scoot himself up so he's like propped up a little bit on his headboard, and then like pours the water into his mouth. And Fisher's like, I think that did it. It's passing. You can go. And Sarah's like, I'm not gonna go anywhere until like you are back asleep. And Fisher is like, I'll make you leave if I have to. And Sarah says like, if you use the oath you tricked me into to force me from this room right now, I will never forgive you. I will find a way to make your life absolutely miserable. In fact, while we're here and having such a lovely conversation about this, you are never going to compel me against my will again. Do you understand me? And Fisher says, I understand. The next 4 hours are really rough. He continues to have these bouts where he's like seizing with pain. And Onyx never leaves Kingfisher's side. During kind of one of the reprieves from the pain, Fisher asks Saris, tell me something that will distract me. Sometimes it'll ease my mind. It'll ease if my mind goes elsewhere. And Saris is trying to like massage the tense muscles from his seizing. And she starts to be like, okay, what kind of story do you want me to tell you? Fisher says, anything. Tell me about your life before. And Sarah says, I don't know. I have very few bright, happy memories to share from Sylvarin. And Fisher says, I don't want bright. I don't want happy. I want real. And so Sarah's like tells like the story of her youth. She talks about how her father had died when Sarah was only 2 and her mother was pregnant with Hayden. And so her mother had to become a sex worker to help keep them fed. Elroy loved Sarah's mother and would take care of Sarah's mother when her clients would like hurt her. And she did not want her daughter forced into the same life that she was having to endure. And so she had Elroy take Sarah on as an apprentice. So she would have like a trade. By then, Iris, her mother, had started smuggling weapons into the district for additional money. And even as a young child, Sarah would run errands for her mother's smuggling business because no one pays much attention to a kid running around the district. And Sarah also took care of her mother took care of her brother Hayden because her mother was so rarely home. Her mother had started to get kind of angry at some of the guardians because the guardians were one of her biggest clients. And she had started to kind of just like be mad because they're terrible and refusing to serve some of them, and that made them angry. And so one day the guardians stopped her and searched her, and they found 2 daggers in her bag, 2 small knives. Sarah had followed her that day to give her her water ration. She had forgotten her water ration at home, and so Sarah had followed her mother to give those back. And Sarah had seen as she had been like searched and they had found these 2 knives. They had executed her mother like right there. Sarah had gone back to the house to get Elroy, and they'd carried her body back to the house. And as they were carrying her body, someone tried to like rip her clothes off of her, and they were spitting on her and like treating her like the trash of the district. Then Sarah and Elroy and Hayden went up into like the cliffs around the 3rd ward and burned her body the next day. When they got back to the house after that like funeral, the house was all boarded up and a big X was painted across the door. It was the first house that they like quarantined from the plague. More houses would like soon follow. And they couldn't stay with Elroy because the guardians would know that it was Elroy that was making the illegal weapons. The connection between Elroy and their mother would be like too clear. And so they had to like make themselves disappear, essentially. They lived in like various attics, essentially were just like homeless, finding shelter wherever they could. And then Fisher says, "Come here," as her like story ends. And she lies down right next to him, trying not to make sure she's not touching him anywhere. Then he grabs her and just like pulls him in closer to her. So they're like spooning. And he says, "My mother was killed too. We have that in common, little Osha." In the morning, she wakes up. She's still snuggled up against Fisher. He's awake next to her, and his hand is like under her shirt, on her stomach, but on the way up. It's moving up. And she arches against him in like silent agreement. Like, "It's okay. You can touch my boob." And then he magically shreds her clothes. They have another hookup this time. This time it is like much softer and slower, not this like frenzied thing that had happened the first time. And then he does talk to her in her head. Like they're mentally chit-chatting with each other, which is new. And Sarah, while they're hooking up, does ask him to bite her. And he does. When Sarah wakes up the next time, she's alone in bed, this time just with Onyx, who runs off the moment Sarah mentions that he smells bad. Okay, yeah, because that's kind of rude. If you woke up and someone was like, "Hey, good morning, you stink," it would kind of maybe hurt your feelings. And it probably hurt Onyx's feelings. He's a little sweet baby angel who just sat with Fisher all night long, and your first comments to him are that he's smelly and needs a bath? I think you need to get your priorities in line. You're smelly and needed a bath. You didn't have a bath for years. Leave him alone. He's a precious angel. The whole house smells like warm bread and coffee, so she pulls herself from bed to go look for Fisher. She finds him out in the living room. He's pulled all the sheets off of the furniture, and it's like such a cozy little space. Fisher is like stared out the window, and she just like watches him for a second, and then he turns around and he says, "I didn't know how you like your coffee." And Sarah says like, "Oh, how long have you known I was standing here?" And Fisher says, "I always know where you are, little Osha." And Sarah says, "I would have gotten dressed, but there weren't actually clothes in that bag you packed for me. I appreciate the sentiment, but 4 different throwing knives, a field dressing kit, and a bottle of whiskey might have been overkill. A pair of clean underwear and a toothbrush would have been nice." And Fisher uses his magic to conjure her a little outfit. It's a little scanty silk set. And Sarah says, "Is this the kind of thing you imagine me wearing often?" And Fisher says, "When I imagine you, little Osha, you are very rarely wearing clothes." And then he invites her to sit with him and eat breakfast. And while she's eating, she's realized that she's gotten even more of his tattoos all over her. And she's like, "What does it mean?" And Fisher's like, "Not much, really. Like, eat." And Fisher's like, and she's like, "Fisher, what do the tattoos mean?" And he starts like pointing at the different tattoos. They are a lot of like runes. Most of them are like connected to like alchemical meanings. And she holds out her palm and points out the mother of all runes shimmering on her skin. And she asks what it means. And Fisher says, "That one is difficult. Can't give you a definitive answer. Not yet." There's like these like bracelets, I think. And Sarah says, like, "There's magic in it, isn't there?" And Fisher says, "There's magic in all of them." And then Fisher holds out his hand, and they seem to vanish off of her skin. And he explains that it's not forever. And Fisher says, you can change your mind about them later if you want to. You have a month or so. If you decide over the next few weeks that you want them back, I'll return them to you. So she has like a month period in which she can either decide to keep or get rid of these tattoos that she's gained from Fisher. And Sarah says, but what if I decide I want cool tattoos after the month has passed? Do I get to choose different designs every time we sleep together or something? And Fisher is like, no, the marks are chosen for you. They won't be there after a month. If you decide not to accept them, they'll be gone for good. And Sarah says there's like clearly more he isn't telling her. Like, it's not just like magic month-long tattoos. Like, clearly something's going on. But he's like very clearly not going to say anything. And then she asks, what do your tattoos mean? And he points out one that means justice, another that means sacrifice, and it's like very large on his skin. And she's still got the bird on her collarbone, and she asks Kingfisher why he didn't take that one back. And Kingfisher goes all weird and stands up and is like, we need to leave soon. You need to take a bath, and I need to say goodbye to Wendy. She's like, okay. And then she goes to the bathroom and she looks in the mirror and she notices that directly above the bird are the welts from where Fisher bit her, which is actually what changed his mood. So he's less worried about the bird tattoo and more worried about the vampire bites, because he's a vampire boy. That afternoon, she's back at camp. She's experimenting in the forge with Carrion again, and she's so frustrated that like none of her experiments work that at the end of the day, she starts just breaking stuff. Bad news. Sirius explains to Carrion that she can talk to the Quicksilver, and Carrion's like, well, maybe you should just like ask it to meld with the silver. Have you tried that? And she's like, that would be like way too simple. I'm sure that's not the solution. And Carrion's like, well, you should try. I'm like, I want to watch you try. And Saris is like, I can't try again to make a relic. I haven't refined the silver yet, so we don't have enough silver to do that. I was taking a moment to do this, but there's a way to half test the theory. And yes, you can come watch, but only if you promise to keep your mouth shut and not get in the way. And so they head to the like war room, the map room, which is like dark. There, the fire that had been there the night before is not in the grate. But immediately she can hear the Quicksilver. It starts to whisper, she comes, she comes. It hadn't spoken last time, but it hadn't spoken the last time she was in the war tent, but this time it's feeling real chatty. It starts to say, she comes, she sees, she hears. Hello? Are you here? She like is thinking that she's like mentally communicating with the Quicksilver. The answer was instantaneous. Where is here? We can be everywhere. And Sarah says, can you come out of the stone? And Quicksilver says, why? Why? Because the warrior who owned you is angry with me, and I want to put you back together. We are not owned. And Carrion's like, hey, what's going on? Are you talking to it? And Sarah's like, shh, remember how I told you had to have your mouth shut? It was at the lips, like a padlock. Sarah goes on to say, the female warrior who carried you, not owned you, she wishes to carry you again. Unless you can be put back together, she can't do that. Fae and human desires do not concern us. What does concern you? Give us music and we will obey. And Sarah says, okay, how about this? Allow me to reforge you and I'll have someone sing a song just for you. And the Quicksilver says, a song from start to finish for us to keep? And Sarah says, yes, I promise a whole song for you to keep. And the Quicksilver says, and will you forge us into a mighty blade unlike any other? Yes, if you will allow it. We will accept. And will you bestow the blade I forged with magic that the bearer might wield? A gift revoked. You asked for what cannot be given. And Carrion is like, Sarah. And she's like, shut up, stop. And then Sarah says, is it not within your power to give magic? All is within, but it is undeserved. We decided long ago. And Sarah says, how do you know? How can you tell if a warrior doesn't deserve the gift? Have you assessed the worthiness of every warrior who wishes to wield a sword? All warriors are the same. They only wish to kill. Sarah says, that isn't true. Most warriors fight because they have to protect and defend. Improbable. How can we show you otherwise? And there's a really long pause. Sarah says it lasts like minutes of her just like waiting. And then the Quicksilver says, we will bear witness to the blood. And Sarah's like, so like, what exactly does that mean? It sounds a little spooky. The Quicksilver says, we will be forged anew. When you have upheld your end of the bargain, we will taste the blood of the one who would carry us. If they are honorable, we will consider allowing the old magics to flow through us again. And Sarah says, thank you, thank you. And the Quicksilver says, do not thank us yet. The die is not cast, Sarah's vain. First, you must restore us and bring us a song worthy of glory. And Sarah says, oh, like, don't even worry. I'm going to do both of them. It's going to be great. And then all the metal shards start to, like, wiggle themselves free from the stone. And they, like, some of them land in her hand, and then most of them land on the ground because she can't catch them all, you know. Then Lorith comes in, and he uses his magic to gather all the shards into a ceramic pot. And Sarah says, like, Lorith, I was just going to start looking for you. I think I know how this might work. Sarah's is at the forge working on Danya's sword, and the Quicksilver's being like such a good citizen. It smells like perfectly in with the silver, but clearly the Quicksilver is like still like keeping an eye on Sarah's, doesn't totally trust her, and wants to make sure she's gonna uphold her end of the bargain. And she's working really hard to like make a really, really cool sword. She goes outside and finds Carrion and Lorth, and they're competing over who can throw the dagger at the tree the most number of times. And Lorth wins, which means Carrion has to make him dinner. And then Carrion's annoyed because Lorth says he had never done that before. But what Lorth failed to mention was that although he's never had like a competition where he threw a dagger at a tree, he obviously has thrown a dagger multiple times in actual battle. So he's like pretty good at it. And Ceres thinks that it serves Carrion right, given all the time he cheated people back in the Silver City. Ceres actually came outside to ask Lorth if he could whittle. Luckily, Lorth is an excellent whittler. Good thing the first person she asked can whittle. Ceres continues to work on the sword all night, the Quicksilver urging her to like keep going. Lorth, meanwhile, whittles a wolf head out of wood, and Ceres talks him through the process of like using that to create a mold for the silver to be poured into. By 4 o'clock in the morning, Carrion is so tired he falls asleep on the forge floor, and Fisher comes in and is like, hey, I think maybe you should like head to bed. You need to rest. And Ceres is like, not until I'm done. I'm nearly there. And Ceres can sense that like Fisher has just like waits nearby, like he doesn't leave far from the tent. And then eventually he comes in and he is like, she's like, why didn't you come in earlier? And he said, I didn't know if you'd want me to. And Ceres says, come in from the cold, Kingfisher. I will soon. I'll sit here a little longer, I think. And then eventually he does come in and like sit with her as she like continues forging the sword. Both men, Lorth and Fisher, are inside helping her as she finishes up pouring the steel into the wolf mold and kind of doing the last bevelings of the blade. And then it's done and it's like an absolutely gorgeous sword. Lorth picks it up and admires it, and he's like running his finger along the blade and he accidentally nicks his finger. And he's like, oh my gosh, it is so sharp. You just have to like look at it and it cuts. Then they head outside and there is an aurora in the sky, which like, as a girly in Colorado, you probably, a lot of the country did, because I think solar storms are fairly large. We were able to see the aurora from like where I lived in like the Denver area recently. It was very underwhelming, to be honest, with your naked eyeballs, but it looked cool through your phone. Like you could see the pink in the sky, sort of. I think there was too much light pollution. It was very cool. This seems more spectacular. Also, I think the aurora probably was cooler in general back in the day, because like light pollution wasn't a thing. I mean, I don't think these guys have like electric lights. Apparently, the aurora hasn't been seen in over 1,000 years, so it's like a really good omen. And Lorth begins to sing. He has been tasked with giving this blade a song. I'm not going to read you the whole song because it's quite long, but I'm going to give you the beginning and then I kind of explain the story. To those who will listen who haven't been told, the day of the last drake woke and rose from the cold, of the young warrior who came veiled in shadows and blood to defeat the foul creature and save those he could, of the Fisher King and the wolves at his back who came howling in the night together in a pack. The frost blessed the morning, the warriors faced their fate. And thus begins our tale of the Ballad of Ajun Gate. And the song continues and tells the story of this king, Kingfisher, and his wolves and how they overcome the Dragon King and wind up killing him and saving the Ajun people in the Ajun Gate. And they're getting ready to go present the sword to Danya when the Quicksilver starts to speak, and it says, we have considered the first to bleed upon our blade. And Lorth tries to pass the blade back to Ceres as he's kind of like realized what he's done, but it's too late. The blade has already claimed Lorth. And Quicksilver says, this is not Danya's sword. We are reforged, new onto this place. You do not claim us, Lorth of the Broken Spires. We claim you. And it's very clear that Danya's not going to love this, but there's not really much she can do about it. Like the Quicksilver has decided, and Sarah says, you deserve it, Lorth. You carved the wolf for the pommel. You helped to cast it. And it was your song that sealed the bargain with the Quicksilver. And Lorth is like, what are you talking about? What song? And Sarah says, the song you literally just sang about the Ajun Gate, about the drake, and how Fisher stabbed the dragon down its throat, not ringing any bells. And Lorth is like, I always meant to write a song about the Ajun Gate, but I never got around to it. And Ceres realizes that the Quicksilver had literally taken the song out of the memories, because like Fisher can't remember it either. And Ceres asks the Quicksilver, that's what you meant, that you would take it, it would disappear, that no one would remember it. The Quicksilver says, it's ours now. And Ceres says, well, I can remember it. And the Quicksilver says, we remember, so the alchemist remembers. And Ceres is like, okay, I guess that's cool. Anyway, are you going to let this sword channel magic for Lorth? And the Quicksilver says, hold me with both hands and name me Lorth of the Broken Spires, the Quicksilver said. And Lorth looks a little bewildered, like, because the Quicksilver was something he could hear as well now. And he goes, me? And the Quicksilver says, it is your privilege. Ceres is like, go on, name your sword. Lorth names the sword Aveseth, the Unsung Song, Redemption's Dawn. Another sword name we have to keep track of. Ugh, devastating. And then a pillar of white light shoots from his sword out into the sky. And Fisher goes, oh, Angel's Breath. So this sword has been channeled with the power of Angel's Breath, which is cool, I guess. After that, the camp is in total chaos. King Fisher walks, because everyone at camp just saw like the giant white light shoot into the sky. And King Fisher walks Ceres back to his tent. Ceres is like pretty sore, and Fisher tells her to take a bath and then they'll head to bed. And he carries her to the tub once they're inside his tent. Okay. And he helps her take a bath, and Fisher's just sitting outside of the bath, and then they like touch fingers. This is a long section in which it's described them touching fingers. Very romantic. And Fisher says, I was wrong, you know. You are a good thief. And Ceres goes, what have I stolen? And Fisher says, sleep a little. The water will stay warm. I will be back as soon as I've spoken to Wren. She drifts off and wakes up to Fisher washing her hair, which seems like a startling thing to wake up to. Like, having someone wash your hair is lovely. Oh my gosh, lovely. But that does seem like a startling thing to be like asleep, and then all of a sudden you've got like shampoo on your head and someone's going like this. Feels like a lot. I think I might need a little warding before someone started shampooing my head if I was in like a dead sleep. Anyway, when she drifts off again, she wakes up to Fisher carrying her, lifting her out of the bath and carrying her to bed. The next time she awakes, she's in bed with Fisher and her stomach is growling. He's sleeping behind her and she doesn't want to move, happy to just like soak up this like quiet moment between them. Ceres searches for the Quicksilver in Fisher. She's like, now that I can talk to it, I want to talk to the Quicksilver that is like lodged in Fisher's eye. And immediately she can hear it, and it's so loud. It's like overwhelmingly loud. Like, no wonder it's driving Fisher mad. Like, it's really noisy and it'll be hard to like think. And it keeps saying, a Northrath more, a Northrath more. And Ceres goes, hi, hey girl, I'm Ceres, I'm an alchemist. And the Quicksilver says, we know who she is. She is the dawn, she is the moon, she is the sky, she is oxygen. I don't know how they know about oxygen, but okay. And then Ceres says, okay. Like, you didn't need to make it weird. Like, hey. She's like, hey guys, could you guys leave Fisher? And Quicksilver's like, we can't leave him, we are him. And she's like, no. He's like, not you. He's Fae, you're Quicksilver, different. You're not supposed to bind to living creatures. It's against kind of the rules. And the Quicksilver says, no, it isn't. We bind with all kinds of weapons. And she says, Fisher isn't a weapon. He's living, he's breathing. And the Quicksilver's like, yeah, he's a weapon. The best. We are him, he is us. We cannot leave. We will die. And Ceres is like, you'll die or he'll die. And she says, and the Quicksilver says, all of us, we are one thing, one weapon. And Ceres says, no, I could like help guide you out. I can feel you inside of him. I could put you back with the other Quicksilver at Cahlish or forge you into the most impressive blade that's ever been. And the Quicksilver says, no, we were forged hundreds of years ago. We cannot be unmade. And Ceres says, you're really hurting him. He's suffering because of you. And the Quicksilver says, we are him. He is us. We all suffer, alchemist. There is nothing to be done. And Ceres says, yeah, you're just going to like, you could leave. So like, is the plan just to like keep pushing him until he cracks, until he dies? If you kill him, what then? Quicksilver says, then we will do as all dying things do. We will return the dirt and the sea and the sky. We sleep. We evolve. We change. We transcend. And Ceres is like, you're stealing life from him. You have no right. And the Quicksilver says, we gave him a life. A boy, just a boy. He was young when he entered our pool. He should not have survived it, but he was strong. And the grand halls of the universe rang aloud with his purpose. We permitted him to live so that he might fulfill that purpose. We bound ourselves to him so that he might survive. The die was cast centuries ago. We accepted our fate, alchemists. All of us did. And Ceres is like so sad, but she's like, I'm gonna keep trying. And then Fisher like brushes her cheek, and he's awake, and he'd heard like bits of the conversation that happened between her and the Quicksilver. But like he knew that she was going to. He knew that as soon as she learned that she could talk to the Quicksilver, that she would talk to the Quicksilver in him. He knew that she would try. And Ceres asks if he's mad at her for trying. And Fisher says, of course not. How can I be angry? You wanted to help. But now you know. It's not just inside of me. It's a part of me. Without it, I'd die. Wren comes into the tent and he like apologizes because he didn't realize Ceres was there, and she is like naked in Fisher's bed. But he has to let Fisher know that the hordes are at the banks again, and Fisher starts to like get ready to leave the bed, and then Wren turns to Ceres and is like, hey, it'd be better if you just like stayed here. And Ceres is like, no, obviously I'm coming. And they both look over at Fisher, and Ceres says to Fisher, the only way I'm staying in this tent is if you force me to. And obviously this is the line that Ceres has like really drawn. Fisher knows that if he compels her using that oath, that like they're done. This is like her firm line in the sand. And apparently she's decided she needs to insert herself into every situation. And I think oftentimes, this is like one of my biggest gripes besides death packs with romantasy, is that like these girlies want to insert themselves into situations because they like feel like it's the noble thing to do. Like, I don't want to just like sit by while my friends are in danger. But like oftentimes there's situations in which they are like way over their head, and it's actually making it more dangerous for everyone involved for them to be there. And I think occasionally we need to like look at that and be like, am I helping or hurting the situation? Like, objectively, am I going to provide assistance here? And the answer in this case, I don't think, is yes. Anyway, Fisher asks her, he says, will you go back to Cahlish? And she's like, I will not. And Fisher's like, okay, if you come with me, you have to stay right next to me. And Cerys is like, okay. Fisher confirms that he has to listen to her when they're out there without like question. He like makes her promise. He's like, if we're out there, if I tell you to run, you run. If I tell you to stay put, you stay put. You understand? And she's like, for sure. And then Fisher unwraps solace from her bags and he passes it to Cerys. And he says, my father's bones rest somewhere in Zilvarin. His sword spent the past millennia there, which makes it more Zilvarin than Yavalian now, I think. So he's gifted Cerys with his father's sword. And Fisher says to her, are you ready? And Cerys says yes. And Fisher says, be unrelenting and unmerciful in the face of the wicked dead. And Ren says, and if you should find your soul sundered from flesh, order a drink for us at the first tavern you come across in the afterlife. We'll settle the tab when we get there. They head out into the storm. It is raining outside and like lightning. And I don't know much about weather, okay? I'm going to say that meteorology is like definitely one of my like blind spots. I like don't know how weather arrives here. Like, what the heck is wind? What? How does the clouds decide when the rain is going to come out of it and when it's going to stay in the cloud? I don't know. I like truly don't have any idea how weather works. But it does seem kind of suspicious to me that they are like having trouble with this river freezing. And like rivers need a higher or a lower temperature to freeze. Like, it's harder for them to freeze because the water is like constantly moving. And so it needs to be like enough where like big enough chunks can freeze at a time without like just getting rushed downstream. I like Googled this because I was like, how cold does it need to be for a river to freeze? And they're like, well, technically it just needs to be above freezing, but like it really needs to really consistently be at that temperature because it's just like a lot harder to freeze a river. To get like a natural body of water frozen solid enough where you can like walk on it, you need to have like cold weather like consistently. Like, it needs to be below freezing pretty much without it going above that for like long stretches of time, because otherwise, especially with like a river, things will thaw and then like start moving and then you have to refreeze all over again, and you need like a pretty thick chunk before you can walk on it. So the fact that it is raining outside makes me think that like the river shouldn't be frozen at all anymore. Like, this shouldn't be a problem because like, how is it raining and also we still have ice on the river? Regardless, they head outside to the river where on the other side vampires are like snapping and snarling, but there are less than last time because the ice is thinner, probably because it's actively raining, and the vampires can't pass over running water. I'm confused by this because they did. Like, the running water, like the river is still running under the ice, I assume. Maybe it's not. It is now, but like, isn't it always? I don't know, guys, I'm very confused by this. But sometimes if one of them will ride the ice, the others will kind of like tumble out after them. I should also make it clear, we like get a lot of description of like the individual vampires here. In my vampires, in my artistic rendering of Quicksilver, do all look pretty much the same. They look like what pops up in Canva when I type in vampire. But in the book, they're like described as like people that like look like tattered. They look kind of more like zombie-esque than what I've depicted. They look like normal human people from like all walks of life that are now like these mindless like killing machines, giving more zombie than vampire. Anyway, and so like everyone's gathered here to like make it sure they don't get past the river. Malcolm didn't come with the vampires this time. They can hear the sounds of the hammers beating against the ice, and the vampires are already like falling into the cracks. This like seems like a less urgent time than last time. But some of the vampires are making progress, but they can't actually attack the vampires until they cross the middle of the river. There is like a border that runs through the midline of the river, and Fisher explains that they're bound by the rules of war, so they can't attack an enemy unless it is in their land. And he also explains that their magic doesn't work on Sansorathi soil, so once it's over that midline, their magic does not work anymore. He explains fighting magic needs light and life to survive, and there's nothing on their side of the river but death and darkness and decay. And then the first one crosses the midline, and they start launching magic at it immediately. Ren launches this giant orb of magic that shatters the ice, and everyone cheers. Unfortunately, some of the vampires are able to like make it across and like are crawling onto the shore. And someone starts shouting, there are more crossing, and Ren tells Fisher to go. He's going to babysit Cerys, and Cerys, like, promises to stay put. And so, like, Ren and Cerys are, like, back to back, ready to, like, fight any vampires that come their direction. The Quicksilver in Solace, in the blade that Cerys has been gifted with, is whispering, us too, us too. Vampire fighting ensues. There are, like, a lot of them, way more than, like, the 20 that fell into the ice. Where do they come from? We don't know. Ren tries to send her back up to the forge to find Lorth, since the fighting is getting more intense, and she is not really that well trained. But Cerys is like, I'd promise I'd stay here. If I ran off into the dark by myself, I'll definitely die. I have better odds with you. And Ren says, stubborn girl, don't you dare die on my watch, Cerys Vane. Fisher will never forgive me if his sole reason for living is torn to pieces on her first day at the battlefield. Cerys beheads her first vampire, and then she's just, like, slicing him up. Fisher comes to check on her in a plume of black smoke because she gets, like, knocked to the ground for a second, but she's fine. And Ren is like, she's been kicking butt, brother. She wields Solace almost as well as your father did. And then they get back to fighting. It's implied that I don't think I mentioned this, but it's implied that Cerys is, like, so good at fighting because when her mother was a weapons smuggler, some of the, like, men would teach her how to fight. And then she would, like, practice in the attic by herself. Okay. You know what? Sometimes I just am okay with a girl being, like, the best at her particular talent, even though it doesn't totally make sense. This one, like, particularly doesn't make sense. Like a bunch of, like, random people training her, like, sporadically over her childhood doesn't seem to me like it would make her the best fighter in all the lands. But, like, go off, girl. And, like, she's not described as, like, the best, but she can definitely, like, hold her own against these vampires. She was able to, like, fight the, like, guard, the Queen's Guard back in, like, the first half of the book. So, like, she is clearly, like, not... She's, like, well-equipped to do violence in some capacity. They go back to fighting, and then Lorth's sword explodes with this, like, white light and turns a bunch of vampires around him into ash. And then Fisher starts chanting. It's, like, the last of the vampires. He, like, saves the day. He starts chanting, Lorth of the Broken Spires, Lorth of the Darn. And then the whole camp starts chanting his name. And Cerys, like, feels, like, quite moved by it. Like, this like, chanting that everyone is participating in. But then a voice cuts through the chanting on the other side of the river. And it just shouts Kingfisher. And it's a woman's voice. It's Everlayne. And she's surrounded by hundreds of vampires. The boys are both freaking out over the fact that she's on the other side of the river. A shadow gate opens up behind Kingfisher. But Ren won't let him go through it because... like, it's a trap, obviously. He's like, this is the most obvious trap that's ever trapped, you know? And Fisher's like, okay, well, I'm going to swim across the other side to go get her. And, like, once again, I'm confused by the ice situation. Like, just a second ago, vampires were literally, like, walking across the river, and now Fisher's going to swim across? Like, how much ice is here? How much ice is here? I don't know. I'm, like, confused by it. And Ren is like, no, you can't just, like, go over there. That's what they want. You won't have any magic once you get over there. You'll be dead before you get through 10 of them. Can you live with that? And the Fisher is like, of course not. I, like, can't live with the fact with Everlayne dying. And then Ren says, then think, why the hell do they have Lane over there? Why isn't she already dead? And they start shouting across the river to Everlayne, and she tells them that she's not badly hurt, but she tells them to stay put, like, don't come rescue her. And then Ren says, run to the river and then swim as far as you can, and we'll scoop you up once you get to the midline. And Lane is like, I can't. And then Fisher says, look at her neck. And Everlayne has this, like, gold band around her neck that has a chain that one of the vampires is holding. A different vampire, one that is, like, clearly younger than Malcolm, steps through the crowd of vampires. We'll learn his name is Taladaius. He says, well met, Fisher. I see you've managed to restore one of your precious swords. Congratulations. Why don't you come over here and say hello to an old friend, Fisher? Your sister and I had a bottle of that red you like breathing back in the dining room. Why not join us for a glass? And Fisher's like, if you've hurt her. And today Taladaius says, oh, please, you know me. I don't have the stomach for hurting things you care about. My father does enjoy adding to his collection. And since he recently lost his most valued prize, it only made sense that he'd want to replace it. Come on, you must have expected something like this from him. And Fisher asks Everlayne, Malcolm bit you? And Everlayne confirms that although Cerys can't hear. And Cerys is like, that's no big deal. Like, I got bit, or didn't get bit, but she got scratched by some vampires and she recovered and she's just a human. She's like, well, just take her to a healer, get her all fixed up. And Fisher is like, no, she's enthralled to him. Later, I'll explain little Osha. And Ren says, what do you want, Taladaius? Why did you bring her here? And Taladaius says, he bid me bring her. She's a trap. He wants to bend you to his will, so he's taken something precious to you. And he's broken it. Are you shocked? You will either come and try to save her, even though doing so would be futile, or else you'll come for vengeance's sake. Either way, he knows you'll come. He doesn't care why, only that you do. And then Lorth shows up, and he sees that Everlayne and Taladaius holding her chain, and he's like, is also like stricken by like the bad news of that situation. And then Taladaius goes on, he's waiting for you at the place where you brokered your last deal. And then Taladaius goes on to explain that Everlayne was bitten 12 hours ago, and if Fisher doesn't meet Malcolm, he'll make sure that Everlayne goes through with the change and has a really, really bad time. We go into like a lot of explicit detail that like I'm not repeating here, but like essentially it's like, you know, he's threatening like horrifying violence against women. It's going to be a bad time for Everlayne if Fisher does not come. And Lorith is like, what does he want? And Fisher's like, well, he wants me. And Taladaius is like, you're on his wish list, but he doesn't just want you this time. You might have been a valuable player in this game before, but a lot has changed of late. There are far more interesting pieces on the board. And Fisher shouts, well, he can't have her. Obviously talking about Cerys. And Taladaius says, you can kick all you and scream all you'd like, but he wants the alchemist Fisher. If he has to burn down all of Yavalia to claim her, you know perfectly well that he will do that. They head to the war room after the battle to kind of discuss. Everyone's like pretty depressed about the whole Everlayne situation. There's really not a ton of hope for her, but obviously they're going to try their best to rescue her regardless. Cerys is trying to mind talk to Fisher, but he's gone kind of catatonic, and Lorith is like kind of fuming. He's like, there has to be some way to burn away the enchantment between the master and the thrall between the conversion begins. And he is trying to like get Fisher's attention as well, and Ren says, just like give him a minute. He can't hear you. He's like thinking. He's like in his own head, like just completely lost the world. We learn that Malcolm's bite is more potent because he was the first affected by the blood curse. And obviously, if you've seen the Vampire Diaries, you know what that means. He's the only original vampire left because the rest took the cure and he ingested their power somehow. Like he has been absorbing everyone who's taken the cure's power. And he's old, and every year that he's alive, he just seems to get more strong and more powerful. When a person becomes enthralled, as Everlayne has become to Malcolm, they are bound to the vampire who bit them, and they become mindlessly devoted to that vampire's needs. When their master gets bored with them, they'll drain them, and then 3 days later, they'll rise again and turn into those, like, the feeders, the, like, zombie-like vampires that they see in the hordes. Malcolm only needs to bite once to create a thrall. Everlayne is now completely under his control. Even if we broke into Amontroth and managed to free her, she wouldn't come. She'd fight so she could stay and please her master. And in a little less than 56 hours, she's going to die. Malcolm's venom is lethal, Cerys. All it takes is one drop. He doesn't need to drain her to kill her now. The work is done. Only two possible paths lay before Everlayne. If Malcolm permits her to drink from him, and she actually does it, then she will return and become something like Malcolm's lords. If she refuses to drink from Malcolm, or if he refuses his blood to her, then she'll die and return as a feeder. In that moment, Fisher seems to come back to his body, but just then Danya walks into the room. And she immediately walks up and punches Lorth in the face and tells him to give her her sword back. And Fisher is like, it's not your sword anymore, Danya. And they try to explain the sword situation to Danya, but she lunges for the sword anyway. And the moment she touches it, her hand evaporates into this pink mist. And Ren is like, oh my god, it took her hand. And Fisher says maybe she'll stop punching people in the face now. And he suggests she go see a healer because her hand might be able to be regrown if she addresses it quickly. And Cerys thinks to herself, Danya didn't deserve to have her hand be regrown. Her theatrics had reached a point where she deserved to live with the consequences of her temper. I'm sorry, that's actually insane. Danya has been nothing but annoying, but, she wants the sword that, really should have been hers by rights, and, she has been a little pill. Okay, she's been annoying, but, that does seem like a reasonable request, and even if it's not a reasonable request to have her sword back, the consequence of her attitude is her having her sword taken away, having her hand evaporated into pink mist seems like a extreme reaction to this. Is she the best behaved person on the planet? No, but neither is Kingfisher. Remember, Kingfisher was the literal worst citizen of all citizens for the first 65% of this book, and then he decided to be a nice boy, and he had no consequences for being a little rotten head the whole time. And I understand he's got evil metal poisoning. Okay, got it. But we don't know Danya's story. She's been at this war camp for 100 years trying to keep things afloat. She's also been having a bad time. The plan is for all of them to head back to Cahlish to see the healers there, but also, before they go, Fisher is our alchemist faced the enemy tonight and stood her ground bravely. We have among us a newly blooded warrior. And Cerys doesn't want to fuss, but they explain that it isn't really about her, but that they need to honor this moment where she has become a warrior. And so they're going to do so. They each kneel in front of her and tell her, I give you my blood in thanks for, fighting alongside them, and, nick their finger and, give her a little bit of their blood. And this is, the ceremony of, becoming a warrior. And then Fisher does it last, and he says, I give you my blood in thanks, Cerys Fane. Cerys realizes it's, the first time that Fisher has, really used her name. He's called her a lot of things, but very rarely, if at all, has he called her Cerys. They walk through Shadowgate. They end up back in the dining room at Cahlish, and Ceres takes her, like, usual seat, which is, like, right next to where Fisher sits. And Danya points out that that seat is a place of pride at the family table, usually reserved for the lady of the house, aka Fisher's wife. And she's like, it's really offensive that he even lets you eat with us because you're a human girl, but to take that seat is, like, the utmost disrespect. Ren steps through the Shadowgate, like, a moment later, and as Danya's kind of explaining this, and he says to Ceres, like, do not worry about it, Ceres. You are perfect right where you are. And Danya says, what the hell? You treat her like some important foreign emissary. She's just a human. What other rules will she be allowed to break? Fisher arrives next. No rules have been broken, Danya, he says to her. And even if they had, it wouldn't be any of your business. And Danya says, we all know you've slept with her, but she's a human. And Ren says she's honorable and brave, not to mention the most powerful alchemist ever documented. She disarmed you in a second, if you recall. Who are you to say if she and Fisher don't belong together? And Fisher's like, you know what? My personal life, not up for discussion. And then Carrion strolls in the room. Apparently, he had slept through the entire battle. And he's got a little potted plant with him that he rescued from the snow. He just, like, shows up with a plant. Bellis at the beginning of Twilight style. And Lorith is going to take Danya to the healer because she, like, gets up and faints. She's lost a lot of blood because her whole hand is missing. And then Fisher sends Ceres to the forge to work on the relics because they're going to need them. And now she knows how to make them. Carrion seems to have a little bit of a crush on Danya. He, like, makes a comment about it. And then Ceres says, God's alive, Carrion. Do not tell me you have a thing for Danya. She is awful. And Carrion says, I love a girl with a sharp tongue and a bad attitude. Good. We love that for you, Carrion. Onyx hangs out with Ceres in the forge. It's the middle of the night, but they, like, slept. Her and Fisher slept all day, so she's not tired. Ceres finds the Quicksilver harder to work with here than the Quicksilver had been back at the forge that she had used for that sword. And Carrion says, we're wasting time, and I'm confused. You have the ability to command the stuff to do what you want. Why don't you just force it to comply? And Sarah says, I'm not forcing it to do anything. It's sentient, Carrion. It has a mind of its own. It thinks, it talks, and I'm not going to make it do something if it doesn't want to do it. And Carrion says, you and Fisher seem like you've gotten pretty close. He changes the topic abruptly. And Sarah says, I'm not talking with you about him. And this Carrion's like, come on, we got nothing better to do. But she kind of, like, puts her foot down. They briefly talk a little bit about it, but not really. And then the Quicksilver starts talking, and it wants secrets. That's what it's asked Ceres for. And it says to her, we like secrets. We'll change for you if you'll tell us one. And Sarah says, okay, if I tell you a secret, will you still remember it afterwards? And the Quicksilver says, of course. And Sarah says, will it still be a secret, though? And the Quicksilver says, you will know, and so will I, but I won't tell it, I swear. And Sarah says, okay, I don't want to go back to Zilvarin anymore. Not forever, anyway. I want to go home and get Hayden and Elroy, and then bring them back here to Yuvalia. And Quicksilver says, yes, a good secret. Very good. You want to save him. You must. And Sarah says, Hayden, yeah, I want to save my brother. And the Quicksilver's like, not him. The Kingfisher. Save him. Save the gates. Save Yuvalia. And Sarah says, what do you mean save Kingfisher? He's here. He's okay. He's fine. And the Quicksilver says, we are token, key, relic, shield, seal us with blood, alchemist. And Sarah adds a drop of her blood into the liquid metal that is absorbed into the relic ring she's making. And the Quicksilver says, complete. We are complete. And Sarah's like, no, but I have more questions. Like, what about the Kingfisher thing that you just talked about? He's safe here. Why does he need saving? But the ring doesn't answer her. Sarah slips the ring onto her finger, and the forge goes dark, and all she can hear is the chanting of a Northrath Moor again and again. She rips the ring off her finger, obviously. She says, okay, don't do that again. Just then, Taladaius, the healer, comes in to check on them. Carrion flirts with her a little bit, but Taladaius reminds him that she's happily married. Okay, I guess you know what? She is a nice woman character. I forgot about her. Danya is mean, and Everlayne is now enthralled to a vampire. But, like, Taladaius does kind of, like, become a more prominent character in this last little bit, and she is nice. Anyway, she is a husband, and Sarah is, like, commenting on her tattoos and how pretty they are, and Taladaius explains that her and her husband designed them together, and she explains that it's a fae custom to mark their skin on their 5th wedding anniversaries. We tattoo the blessings we pray for onto our hands in the hopes that they become manifest. Yaz and I decided on a harmony mark, a longevity mark, and 2 child marks. Greedy, I know. To wish for 2 children. 1 would be blessing enough. But no point in holding back when it comes to these things, right? And she explains that it's recommended to wait until the 5th anniversary, just, like, to make sure that your marriage is, like, really solid before doing these marks. And Sarah says, so you don't just, like, magically get marks when you have sex on your skin. And Taladaius says, of course not, don't be silly. Once upon a time that was the case, back when true mating bonds existed. Unions between true mates were blessed with marks from the fates. That's where the tradition of inking our skin originates from, but there's no such thing as true mates anymore. When the gods left Yavalia, certain elements of our magic either died or waned over time. The god swords, for example, they were very slowly cut off from the source of magic they channeled. Our ability to form mating bonds also died out thousands of years ago, until it disappeared altogether. And then Sarah's like, what if someone had writing all the way around their wrist? What would that mean? Is that something special? Just hypothetically. And Taladaius says, that's only in the storybooks. They call it a god binding, a blessing from the gods themselves. They weren't real, of course. The most important couples in Yavalian history were said to have had them, but it was all just romantic rubbish. Just something storytellers use to embellish their tales and make them more tragic. And Sarah says, that doesn't sound tragic. What do you mean tragic? And Taladaius says, one of them always died. They were beautiful tales, but always ended in heartbreak. And Sarah's like, oh, that's Cressa. Okay, Cressa. Anyway, do you know where Kingfisher is? And Taladaius is like, that's actually why I came here. He wanted me to tell you that he'd be waiting for you in his room. Sarah immediately heads to his room, and the Fisher is in bed, and Onyx has followed Sarah in, runs up, jumps on the bed, and starts licking Fisher's face. And the moment he sees her, he's like, hey, are you good? You look a little off kilter. And Sarah says, why wouldn't you say my name before? And Fisher's like, what? And Sarah says, I've just had a really interesting conversation with Taladaius about the tattoos all over her hands. She was telling me about where they came from and why. And then imagine my surprise when she told me about god bindings, Fisher. And Fisher's like, And Sarah says, tell me why you wouldn't say my name. I know you can't lie, so come on, tell me. Fisher says, you know why. And Sarah says, say it. Say it out loud. And he goes, vampire. Just kidding. He hasn't watched the classic Twilight. Fisher says, all right, fine. Have it your way. At first I didn't say it because I hated you. Hated what you represented. My weakness, my vulnerability. I've known for centuries that you were coming. That you were going to just show up one day and change everything. You are the chink in my armor, Sarah. The soft spot where the knife slides in. You are the thing that Malcolm will hurt in order to hurt me. And I couldn't bear it. And yes, I told you about the Oshellith once. Yes, I told you they hatched and died in a day, but I was being cruel, Sarah. I didn't tell you about them properly. The Oshellith hatch once in most Fae lifetimes, up north in the wastelands, so far beyond Adjun sky, when the dragons used to live. The air is so cold there that it'll freeze in your lungs if you breathe it in without a mask. No life has existed there in so long, but once in 1,000 years, the howling winds drop, signaling the coming of the Oshellith. News of that event travels quickly. That's when the bravest of our kind set out. They go on foot where no horse can go. When they reach the valley where the Oshellith hatch, they find the butterflies' cocoons and they shield them with their bodies. They give them whatever heat they can for as long as they can. It can take up to 12 hours for them to break out of those cocoons, but when they do, it is the most beautiful thing that a person can witness in this lifetime. They glow blue and pink and silver with an ethereal light. They have music, though. No one knows how. A sweet, soft song that's capable of healing. The Oshellith mate and lay their eggs, but once that's done, they fill the air and they dance. Protecting them while they live is considered a sacred rite that many die in order to perform. That's what Oshellith means in Old Fae, Saris. Most sacred. All names hold power in this place. Every name means something. We have our true names that we don't share with anyone, not our friends, not our families. Our mothers are often the only people who actually know it. And even a mother might use her child's name to her own advantage in the pursuit of power. And you show up and you only have one name and everybody knows it. And I couldn't say it because I was scared of what it would do to me when I did. It would be like acknowledging you were here after all of this time. So I called you Osha instead. But it meant more, Saris. To me, it meant more. Okay, one thing about me is I do hate death packs, love a nickname. And I love a nickname that seems like a mean nickname at the beginning, but then turns into a nice nickname. It's perfection. It's perfect. It's perfect. The fact he called her Osha, but it seemed like it was a cruel jab. Although butterfly, I don't know how cruel that could be, but it seemed a little cruel. But it's actually calling her most sacred. Correct. Yeah, I love it. I love it. This is going to win me over every time. Every single time. I'm in. And Saris is like, okay, how did you know I was coming? You said you knew I was coming. How? Fisher explains that his mother had been an oracle and she had told him. And then he's like, but then when I was taken, and his voice cuts off, there's clearly something he can't talk about. It makes him stop breathing for a second. And Fisher then goes on to explain that his mother wrote about Saris. She knew she was going to die, so she wrote him a book. There will be times when the world seeks to destroy you, Kingfisher, but you are stronger than you can ever know. You will not falter, and you will not face it alone. That's what her mother had said about Cerys. She said, when I needed you most, you'd come in blazing into my life like a meteorite, riding on a wave of chaos that would turn my whole world upside down. That you'd shine so brilliantly that you'd light up hell itself and guide me out of the darkness. She had no idea what your name would be, just that you'd have dark hair and a beautiful smile, and then I'd love you with a fierceness despite myself. And we learned that she had drawn pictures of Cerys and had captured her almost perfectly, except Cerys had always been drawn with fey ears, with the pointed fey ears. So when he had gone through the gates and found Cerys on the other side, he knew who she was immediately, and he would have left her there, but she was dying. Like, if he hadn't have rescued her, she would have died that day. And so he had no choice but to bring her back to the Winter Palace. And he tried to be awful to her, tried to, make her stay away from him, but it didn't work. He didn't try that hard. He was, mean to her, but he also was flirty with her constantly and being like, come hang out with me. Don't hang out with the other girl. Just leave her alone, maybe. He goes on to explain that he had felt the mating bond, smelled it, back when she had been first lying in that pool of blood, and it made him angry that the fates had sealed them together without giving them a choice. He'd seen the marks appear while she was sleeping, and it scared him because those marks only appeared in tragic stories, the god marks. And he explains that, his condition is just, continuing to get worse, and the pendant that his mother had given him is working less and less well. He explains that Cerys can't just make him a new one because his mother had that pendant, particularly specially spelled, so it's not just the fact that it's a Quicksilver relic, but also that it has, some magic woven into it. He goes on to say, this thing inside of me is getting stronger. There isn't a spell in existence strong enough to keep it at bay forever. Soon enough, the pendant won't work at all, and I'll be lost. But don't worry, I won't bond to you. And Cerys is like, you rejected the bond between us? And he says, I'm not sure how it works exactly, but he's been researching. He says, either party can start a waiting period that either party can then either accept or reject. I initiated the waiting period for us back in Ballard. So when he had erased her tattoos, that had been him starting this waiting period. Cerys says, that's what all those books were for. In your tent back in Erin, that's what you were doing all that time you were gone. When I was attacked after the feeder, you were looking for a way to free yourself. And Fisher says, I was looking for a way to save you. And Cerys says, she evoked the waiting period for me, for my own good, because it was the right thing to do. Rejecting the bond altogether would have been the right thing to do, but I couldn't do it. But don't worry, the month will pass and nothing will change. First, we're going to get Everlayne back, then you'll finish making the relics. Once that's done, you'll go back to Zulvarin and your brother. And Cerys says, oh great, you've got it all figured out then. Congratulations. I'm so happy for you. I'm thrilled that you've had so long to think about this, that you've known for hundreds of years that I was going to show up in your life, that you knew what those tattoos meant, and that you got to decide that you were going to reject me for my own good and send me packing back to Zulvarin. I'm ecstatic that you made all those awful, difficult decisions on my behalf, Kingfisher. And Fisher says, be realistic. Does it change anything now that you know all this? Do we suddenly have more options available to us? Options that don't completely suck? And Cerys says, I don't know if it changes anything. You're the one with all the answers. Does your mother's book say what happens next? And Fisher says it says nothing. You were right at the end of the book. She wrote only that I'd find you and that the fates would guide our paths from there. And Cerys says, F the fates. They don't get to decide anything for me. I decide what my future is going to be. And Fisher says, you have to go home, Cerys. You can go back and work to free your people. You can be happy. I'm going to die. And Cerys goes, what do you mean you're going to die? You aren't dying. You're just... And Fisher says, you're right. This won't kill me, but it's no life, at least not one I want to live. And I'll end up hurting the people I love. I won't saddle you or anyone else with the burden of caring for me. And Cerys is mad that, Fisher's plan is essentially to, off himself. And she brings up Lorth and how Lorth will end his own life if Kingfisher is dead. And Fisher is like, well, I just plan to keep my death a secret, so Lorth won't know. And then Cerys heads for the door. And Fisher's like, where are you going? And she's like, I'm going to go to sleep. And then in the morning, I'm going to the library. I'm going to research how to save Everlayne. And then I'm going to figure out how to save you. Just because I don't just throw up my hands and accept defeat when things get hard. I'm honestly shocked to learn that you do. And she at first tries to go sleep in her room that she initially was set up in with Carrion, but he snores, and so she leaves, and she winds up finding a couch to sleep on. And when she wakes up, she finds Fisher in the armchair next to her in the room. She tries to leave the room without interacting with Fisher, but he grabs her wrist. And she looks back at him and just sees the heaviness on Fisher, and she turns back and she gives him a hug, and he just leans against her for a moment. They just have a moment in which they are comforting each other. Then they head to the library. It's research time. So far, all that they've uncovered is that they are going to need a witch to help Everlayne, because the only people powerful enough to break the blood magic, to break an enthrallment, they're also the only ones powerful enough to keep Malcolm's venom at bay while Taladaius draws it out of Lane's system. So they need a witch to like do kind of both of those things. Taladaius explains it'll take weeks or maybe even months to draw the poison out of their system. And so they're going to need a very powerful witch to sustain Everlayne for that whole time. And if Fisher knows where there are some witches at this, like at Fulton's Gap, and he offers to travel to go see them. And Wren is like, okay, I'll come with you. Carrion tries to get an invite, but Fisher's like, no way, you're just going to try to flirt with all of them. But Danya winds up going with them as well. So Danya, Wren, and Fisher are going to go deal with the witches, and then everyone else is going to stay back and continue their research. Several hours later, Wren returns alone, looking like worse for wear. Apparently, Danya caused problems because, of course, she did. They had explained the situation to the witches, and like reluctantly, they had agreed to continue until Danya made some comment about like the witches betrayed them, like back in the day or something. And so Wren goes on to explain that Fisher is taking Danya back to camp because she's causing problems, but he thinks he's going to go back to the witches, and he thinks he's going to be able to convince them to come help. There's one witch who seems like she might be strong enough to help them out, but she's like very, very young. A few hours after that, Kingfisher does come back with a red-headed witch who looks to be about Ceres's age. He introduces her as Ishabal, and we learn she's the granddaughter of the Balquidder High Witch Melina, and she's agreed to help break Lane's enthrallment once we bring her back here tomorrow night. And Issa says, you're planning to take on Malcolm and kidnap his newest thrall, which makes with just 3 Fae males and 2 humans. And Fisher's like, well, the humans aren't going to come, so it'll just be 3 Fae male. And Ceres is like, of course we're coming. Everlayne is our friend. Girl, this is not about you. Like, will you be helpful? And I mean, I guess, like, she might be helpful. Carrion is certainly not going to be helpful. But Carrion says, well, I actually didn't know Everlayne, never met her, but I'm still coming for solidarity's sake. And Fisher's like, are you guys sure you're ready? And Ceres is like, you saw me fight at the river. I did like pretty good. And Fisher's like, this will be a lot more intense than the river. Those were feeders, like completely mindless, but Malcolm and his like closest people will like be smart. Are you like ready for that? And Ceres is like, I'm ready. And Carrion's like, me too. And Fisher says, okay, who am I to stop ya? And this is when she should have been suspicious, because that doesn't sound like our boy. Ceres makes her bed on the couch again that night, and Fisher comes in for her not long after, and he says, you really didn't think I'd let you sleep out here again, did you? And Ceres says, I didn't know if you'd want me in your bed. And Fisher says, if it were up to me, we wouldn't spend another night without each other. Does that scare you? And Ceres says, no, it doesn't scare me. I want that too. And then Fisher says, let's have tonight, you and me. Tomorrow night we'll bring Everlayne home, and once Isabel and Talena have fixed her up and good as new, then we can worry about me, okay? And Ceres like agrees, and then Fisher summons a shadow gate behind him, and Ceres steps through it, kind of expecting to be transported right to Fisher's bedroom, but instead it takes them back to that apartment in Ballard. And he has like clearly like cleaned it up. All the sheets are gone, all the dust, and he has lit candles everywhere. It's very cutie, very sweet. They obviously hook up again, and Ceres can like feel the mating bond between them this time, now that she knows kind of what to look for. While they're hooking up, Fisher gets like tattoos from Ceres this time, and he explains that it's because he accepted the mating bond. And Ceres starts freaking out because like she's human. This is like the first time she's realized that like she's gonna die like quite soon, and Fisher is like not. Like he has a much longer lifespan than her. And Fisher says, I'll be grateful for every second that I can say that I belong to you, Ceres Vane. 80 years or 18 hours, it doesn't matter to me. It'll still be the highest honor of my life. Just because I've accepted it doesn't mean you have to. You still have weeks to decide, and if you reject the bond, then it won't matter. My new wings will disappear, and I'll be that. I'm in love with you already, Ceres Vane. And I'm already half mad anyway. What's a little complicated thrown into the mix? When Ceres wakes up the next morning, she's alone in the apartment, and she hears the sound of the shadow gate and immediately knows what Fisher has done. Fisher leaves her a note that kind of explains. This may seem dramatic now, but it'll make sense in time, Ceres. Go through the gate. It will take you back to Cahlish. Wait there with the others. I'll send Lane back as soon as I can. Tell Isabel to sedate her the second she comes through the gate. She'll be close to transitioning. There won't be much time. She'll want to go back through the gate before I close it, so you'll have to be ready for that. You'll have to stop her. This will all be for nothing if she jumps back through. Tell Lorth to live his life. Tell him not to worry about me. I have endless patience and no interest in having martyrs for friends. Tell Wren that I am sorry, that he was the standard that I always held myself to, and Yavalia would have been a better place if I was half as good as him. And you, Osha, I release you from your oath. You know how to make the relics now. A selfish part of me wants to beg you to make as many as you can so my friends and their families can escape Yavalia before this realm falls. But I understand if you need to go. Find Hayden and Elroy. Help your friends. then go exploring. There are countless realms out there, waiting to be found. Make one of them yours. I've never been one to trust in the gods, but I choose to believe that all things come from the same place when life begins. I have to hope that they return to the same place when it ends. I'll be waiting for you there, Sarah's Fane. F. And he's left Nimrel, his father, or his sword. Sarah goes through the gate. She ends up back in Fisher's bedroom, and Carrion is in there. And she's like, Carrion, what are you doing in here? And he's like, I was looking for Onyx, but then I got in here and I was like, I wonder if Fisher has a diary. So I was looking for his diary. I didn't find a diary, but I did find this. And he's like, you will not believe what it is. And she's like, is it a book of prophecies with a bunch of drawings of me in it? And he's like, how did you know? Then they head to the library to meet up with everyone else. Ren immediately sees that she's distressed and is like, what is going on? And she tosses him the note that Fisher left. And Ren's like, that stupid bastard, what does he think he's doing? And Sarah is like, is there a Quicksilver pool at Gale 3? And Ren says, no, not that I know it. Belkin had it merged with the pool in the Winter Palace, so like there shouldn't be one there anymore. And Sarah like doesn't know what to do, because the only plan she could come up with was to make relics for them all and then use them to travel to Gale 3 through the pool. But if there's no pool to travel to, then like there's no point in her making these relics. And then Kyrion's like, wait a second, like if he's gonna toss Everlayne through a shadow gate, can't we just like go back through? They always stay open a few seconds after like people travel through them. And Sarah's like, oh my gosh, that's so smart, I could kiss you. And Carrion says, I wouldn't be opposed, but we've got other stuff to do first. I'm coming with you to save Fisher, and I want one of those fancy swords first. So Sarah heads back to the forge to work with the Quicksilver again, and this time it's asking for a joke. It says we want a little giggle, a little ha ha hee hee. Sarah gives it a nice little like popsicle stick dad joke, and it doesn't like it. Carrion, meanwhile, offers it some body jokes of his own, and the Quicksilver does like those. They say, we love those jokes, Carrion. Keep them a-coming. There wasn't going to be time to make a new sword completely from scratch, but they are just like infusing Quicksilver into one of the swords they already have. Carrion keeps like feeding the sword more jokes as she like forges the sword, and the Quicksilver like keeps asking for more. Literally obsessed with Carrion. Once it's done, Carrion cuts his finger and gives it a drop of his blood, and then is instructed to name the sword, and he names his sword Simon. And Saris is like, has it decided if it wants to gift you with magic, Carrion? And Carrion says, it says that that's for me to know and for you to find out. They go back to the library after the sword's finished, and the women are gone, and they're getting ready to like set up everything to treat Everlayne when she comes through, both the healer and the witch. Ren explains that they're pretty confident, but they've never actually like done this like unenthralling of a fae before, so they're not 100% sure. And then Lorth says, I don't trust her. The witch, dragon lovers, they're the real reason we're in this mess in the first place. If it weren't for them, there wouldn't even be any vampires. Unfortunately for him, Isabel is in the doorway and definitely heard that, and she says to him, tell me you don't really believe that. My people have been persecuted for my whole life thanks to those rumors. We've proved that we had nothing to do with the curse that afflicted your kind. I've come here of my own free will to help you heal the daughter of a tyrant who has a bounty on my family's heads. Anyone would think that you would be grateful, warrior. And then Lorth is like, hey, what's my name? You know it. We've met before, witch. Okay, you just used not her name. And Isabel goes, oh, really? I must have forgotten. I do need to know the tea between these two people. Curious. I hope they have a romance. And then Ren says, enough bickering. She came here to help. She didn't have to. And then Lorth says, I'm sorry, we're all very grateful that you came. They're interrupted because Everlayne falls through the shadow gate because it is in the literal ceiling. They've always been like vertical. This one is horizontal, which makes it like trickier to get through. She like breaks the bookshelf that they like might have used to climb up there. And so then they like don't have much time to like formulate a new plan. And so Lorth and Ren are like hoisting Carrion like through the shadow gate in the ceiling. I don't know, like, Saris is like insistent that he needs to go first for some reason. Like, why? Also, Saris is like not ready for this. She's not prepared. She has to go run and grab her sword. She like left it in the corner. She runs and grabs her sword. She goes in next. Lane is meanwhile trying to warn her about the water. And then Saris is falling. Okay, let's finish this up. It's a new day, which means new sweater for me and new chapters for you. Let's keep going. So they jump through the shadow gate and they land in the water. The shadow gate opens up like 50 feet above this lake. Saris hits the water like quite hard. And obviously she can't swim. There's no water to swim in Zilvarin. It's a desert. in like a very, very real way. And so she hits the water hard. She's kind of like drowning. Luckily, Lorith comes in right after her through the shadow gate, and he helps get her to shore. And then he goes out and rescues Carrion. Carrion jumped in first, so was in the water longer, and so he's unconscious. It takes about a minute of Lorith like pounding on his chest to get him back. He like is like starting to come to, and Saris is actually what actually like fully does it. She says to him, "Carrion Swift, if you don't wake up right now, I'm going to tell all of your friends back in the third that you were a terrible lay." And that like finally brings him back. He like cannot let that happen, obviously. He pukes up a bunch of water and he says, "You wouldn't dare." It's just the three of them. Ren obviously was supposed to come, but didn't make it through the shadow gate because they had terrible priorities. Again, I don't know why Carrion had to go through first. It seems like he should have gone through last. And Lorith actually says like he barely made it through. He could like feel the gate closing behind him. It nearly cut him in half. Lorith gives them both some Widow's Bane, this like drug that essentially like numbs all of their pain out, because both of them are banged up pretty bad. Like they're pretty bruised. Sarah is pretty sure she has some broken ribs from hitting the water so hard. Around them are these like big cliffs, and Sarah can like sense Fisher up there. They're like bond is like clear enough where she can like tell he's for sure up there. And she looks around and it looks like it's snowing, but it's actually like raining ash. Like something is like burning, because like little fluffy clumps of ash are raining everywhere. And then the sky like echoes with the sound of "Anorth the Moor, Anorth the Moor" over and over again. They climb up the cliff. It only takes them a couple minutes, not that big of a cliff. And they end up in this huge amphitheater that is full of hundreds of thousands of people, which like I did Google largest amphitheaters in the world, and like typical like stadiums are less than 100,000 people. The biggest one in the world is technically the Indianapolis 500. So like a really, really, really big amphitheater. And it's just full of people, and they're all up in the stands chanting "Anorth Moor, Anorath Moor." I like pronounce that a little differently every time too. I'm sorry. And Lorith explains that it means "release us." And they can see the people in the stands like kind of look like they're on fire. Like they look like they're burning up as they chill in the stands. They can see in the base of this amphitheater, there is a labyrinth dug into it. And at the far side, at the like far side of the amphitheater is a raised dais. And at the base of the steps is Fisher. And Lorith is like, "What the hell am I looking at?" And behind them comes the voice of Heron, actually. And he says, "Actually, this is only the first circle of Hell Lorith of Broken Spires, but I'd be very happy to introduce you to all 5. Hey, Heron. I actually like kind of vibed with Heron. We met him back at the beginning of the book, and so it's like kind of a bummer to know that he's like really on the team of the evil guys. Like we knew from the jump that he was like kind of on team Queen Maundra's side, and she is bad news, but to know that he's like really like in deep, it's kind of a bummer. Anyway, his eyes are like fully made of Quicksilver now, and he has a knife to Lorith's throat. And Saris is like so confused on how this guy is here. Last time she saw him, he was like not doing well back in Zilvarin, and suddenly he's like gone through the Quicksilver pool and shown up here. It would have been like really pretty easy to disarm him. He's just like one guy and there's 3 of them. Unfortunately, he has like a whole horde of feeder vampires behind him, like waiting to like attack them. So they can't make any moves because they wouldn't be able to stand up against the like hundreds of vampires behind him. Heron opens up a vortex, which is like similar to a shadow gate, but has a different vibe than a shadow gate, and tells Saris to step through. He says, "The walk would take far too long, and we don't want you to miss the beginning of the games now, do we? In now. Hurry. If you hurry, there still might be time to say goodbye to your friend." And she like looks around, and Lorith is like, "Go ahead, we'll be right behind you." And so Saris like steps through and like mentally tells Fisher that they are there and that they're coming. And Fisher responds mentally, "Saris, do not come here. Too late. She's here." Hey, buddy, she actually is here already. Saris immediately, as soon as she steps through the gate, she's transported to like the base of the dais. She immediately spots a Fisher. He's looking pretty badly beaten up as he kneels at the foot of the steps that lead up to this dais. And Fisher says to her, "You shouldn't be here, little Osha. I wanted to save you from this. I didn't want you to suffer with me." And then a bolt of energy strikes Fisher, and like he like bows back in pain. Essentially, he's like being like electrocuted, it seems like. And then she looks up on the dais for the first time and she sees Malcolm in the middle, but then she also is surprised to see Queen Madeira on one side and Belkin on the other side. And she goes, all the bad guys from this book were in cahoots this whole time. Kind of rude. And Malcolm says, I don't think we've been formally introduced. I assume, since no one appears willing to perform the introductions, that you are Cerys. And then he looks over at Lorith, who he knows based on the fact that he's one of Kingfisher's wolves, who also shattered the towers at Barlith. Really, I wish I could pronounce things better. And then he goes to Carrion, he's like, I don't know who you are. And Carrion, like, starts to introduce himself, but, like, he gets interrupted from Heron, like, literally, like, bopping him on the head and making him pass out. Cerys reaches for her sword to try to, like, fight off and defend her people against the baddies, but Malcolm warns her, I caution you against your foolishness. Your swords won't do you any good here. Can't you feel it in the air? This place is a graveyard. The air is full of death itself, and the ground beneath us is bones and ash. Your magic cannot reach you here. And Madara says, you should have at least let them try, brother. I was looking forward to seeing their look on their faces when they realized how much trouble they were in. And Cerys is like, guys, this lady is your ally? She's the one who closed all the Quicksilver pools. What are you doing? And Belkian is like, we knew that. We've always known that as Madra. And yes, we were angry at first, but it's amazing how unimportant these little tiffs seem after centuries. And Madara says, after all, I did only close the gate because you sent that beast through to assassinate me. So there was much to forgive on my end as well. Belkin is like, it's true, you're perfectly right, sister. Mistakes were made on all sides. Lucky for us, we have the opportunity to make past wrongs right. And now that our triumvirate is reunited, all three of us are more powerful than we've been in ages. And Lorith says, how can you stand up there next to him? We've been at war with Malkin. And Belkin says, war? We haven't been at war, you fool. I've simply been feeding my brother's army. What do you mean, feeding your brother's army? That's not very nice of you. And then Fisher is like, I'm going to destroy you. We love it. And Belkian says, just like Finran, his father, foul-mouthed and arrogant, so superior, so self-righteous, but you are less than the dirt beneath my feet, King Fisher. Why don't you tell your precious friends what you did here? Oh, wait, that's right. You can't tell them what you did, can you? And then Belkian knees him in the jaw, which seems unnecessary, but all right. And again, Cerys tries to go to him, but the guards from the Winter Palace are like holding her back. Belkian turns to the crowds and says, what say you, Fae of Gilthry? Should I remove the dog's gag? Should he confess his crimes at last? And the crowds cheer, and the king releases him from the oath and tells Fisher to tell his friends about the deal he had struck so many years prior. And Fisher rises to his feet, and Cerys is like, oh my gosh, you can barely walk. And Fisher's like, I'll be fine, Osha. And then the king tells Fisher to tell the story. And so he begins to tell the story of Gilthry and how the streets had been overwhelmed with hordes of vampires. The Kingfisher and his men had arrived too late to save the city, but they used a shadow gate to bring in some warriors and try to kind of evacuate as many innocent people out as they could. Everyone had been in the streets celebrating this like big festival, and so it had been like really easy for the vampires to come in and just like pick everyone off. Fisher went to go find Malcolm, but instead found Belkian, and we learned that Belkian had slit Fisher's mother's throat as she had right after she had given birth to Everlayne. She was the greatest. His mother was the greatest oracle of their time, but Belkian was sick of her lies, and so he just decided after Fisher's mother gave Belkian a child, he said, you know what, cut the cameras, get her out of here. Fisher didn't know that Belkian was in league with Malcolm, and Fisher wanted to like bargain for the few remaining citizens of Gilthry. And Belkian said he'd flip a coin. If it landed leaf side up, Malcolm would leave the city without harming anyone else. Fish side up on the ground, and he would take the city as his own and destroy it. And Fisher would have to leave those still alive to their deaths and meet him on the battlefield at a later date. Belkian cuts Fisher off at this point to say this. He also wasn't allowed to touch the coin or influence the way it fell. While the coin toss was being decided, he wasn't allowed to harm me or my brother, not a hair on either of our pretty heads, and until the outcome of the coin toss had been decided, he wasn't allowed to speak of the deal or the fact that Malcolm and I were brothers, and he agreed. He was so desperate to save a handful of peasants that he made the blood oath with. And Fisher tossed the coin in the air, and Malcolm catches it, and so it never hits the ground, and so he's been like stuck in this state of like the coin flip never ending since then. Malcolm and his vampire horde feasted all night, and Fisher had to torch the city because there was no one left to save. So he had to just burn the city to prevent all of these people from joining Malcolm's horde. Malcolm explains that's why he made this crazy labyrinth, because he won a little game. You know, the evil guys in these books always are bored. Again, they're always bored. They always like really could just benefit from like some access to some television, like a Netflix subscription. I really think that would solve a lot of their evil if they just like had an activity. They're always coming up with games for these people to do. He made a labyrinth and hid Belkin's coin somewhere in the center and filled the Colosseum full of the burning bodies of Gilthry, and they're watching. All Fisher has to do was to find the coin and make it to fall to the ground to end the people in the stands suffering. So all these people, he kind of caused their death. Not really. It wasn't really Fisher's fault, but he has prolonged their suffering by like not finding this coin. Madra strokes Fisher's jaw. She like reaches. They're like all, I guess, very close together. And Sarah says, "Don't touch him." And Madra says, "I hate to tell you this, but I can do anything to you that I want. Malcolm has always let me play with his toys." And Fisher says, "I play back. It might not be today, but oh, I am coming to find you, Madra. Fear the shadows. I am made of them. One night soon, I'll climb out of one and slit your throat." Okay. And Madra says, "What have I done to deserve such special attention from the likes of you?" And Fisher says, "You spayed my mate when she was a child." And I don't love that Fisher is referring to it as spaying. We're not given the details on like what exactly happened to Sarah to like sterilize her. But like we really only use spaying in terms of animals. So like, I don't know. I don't think we needed to add insults to that injury. We could have just said sterilize, which is like what happened. Anyway, Fisher goes on. "For that alone, I'll make your undying existence an unending agony. I will destroy your empire and erase your name from the annals of time, and you'll live on at my behest, suffering for all eternity, and no one will know, and no one will care." And Madra says, "Okay, I see what you mean, brother. He is quite foul-tempered, isn't he?" And Malcolm says, "Stop! You are ruining the best part of the story." Fisher went into the labyrinth. It was a super great time, super entertaining. Sometimes he even got some fun little visitors. Sometimes I visited and we chitted and chatted. And he made it to the center of the labyrinth after 102 years stuck wandering around. And then he spent the next 8 years looking for the coin. But his all of this ended when the stone beneath the labyrinth cracked, revealing a quicksilver pool below that had opened up. When Sarah opened the quicksilver pools, Fisher bopped right out of there. And Malcolm was surprised. He said, "With all of these poor creatures waiting on you to end their suffering, it seemed highly out of character. I've been dying to know, after 110 years in that labyrinth, what finally made you leave." Carrion's he probably just got so bored he couldn't take it anymore, and that's why he left. And Malcolm is "I don't know about you, Carrion. You smell weird." And Carrion's "It's probably the moss those water sprites rubbed all over me. It was kind of stinky." And Belkian is he left probably because the madness in his veins probably broke him, the quicksilver. And Malcolm says, "Is that true, my love? Has the quicksilver in your head finally pushed you beyond the bounds of sanity?" And Fisher says, "I felt better, but no, that isn't the reason why I left. I went into that quicksilver because I felt my father's sword calling to me, and I knew that I'd need it for this." And then Fisher jumps up. He does a little spin. He wasn't as tired as he looked, and he stabs Belkian right through the chest. Madeira starts screaming immediately, and Malcolm is that was ill-advised. He jumps at Fisher, but Lorith cuts him instead with his magic quicksilver blade, and it makes this puff of black smoke leave from Malcolm. Fisher tells them all to run to the labyrinth. And Malcolm says, "So eager to run back into your cage, pet." And Lorith is ready to chop some people up, but Fisher is "I'm serious, don't engage with anyone, just get to the labyrinth." Saris is trying to break away from Heron. She winds up getting her nose broken kind of in the shuffle. And Belkian is still alive, but he's fallen to his knees as Fisher rips the blade from him. And Heron says to them, "You're in way over your head, rat." So particularly talking to Saris. Saris slices him up while Madra yells at Heron to end it. And Saris asks how long Heron's been doing her dirty work, and we learn that Heron has been working for Madra for centuries because Madra has gifted him eternity, is what he says. Interesting. Saris ends up snapping Heron's neck, and then Lorith is calling her to the labyrinth. All of them start running, and they all four race into the labyrinth. "Run all you like," Malcolm shouted after us. "The labyrinth is my domain. It's going to eat you alive." Fisher grabs Saris's hand the moment they get inside, and then he explains that the first 10 moves to the labyrinth are always the same. That's where you face the first obstacle, and then the route to the center constantly changes. And Carrion's "Well, how are we supposed to get to the center if it's constantly changing?" That seems tricky. And yeah, Carrion, it took him 102 years for a reason. If it was really simple and easy, it would have been embarrassing if it took 102 years. Fisher starts guiding them through the first turns, and Saris turns to him and is "Do you have a plan?" And Fisher says, "Yes. You." That is when they encounter their first creature. It's this giant, like, globby Spider-Man monster. It has, like, a ton of legs and, like, a man's torso and really skinny little arms. It doesn't look similar to this monster at all that I've depicted for us. But you have to use your own imagination. Sorry. Carrion is, like, going so quickly that he almost crashes into it, and Fisher is like, stop, don't move. And he explains that the creature can't really see or hear, but can track motion, so as long as you're still, he can't, like, see that you're there. And then Fisher explains that there are 3 doors behind the creature. 2 of them lead to the enclosures of other monsters, and one of them leads to, like, the rest of the maze. And he wants Ceres to use the Quicksilver to find the right one, because there is that big pool of Quicksilver that is at the center of the labyrinth. So she should be able to, like, listen to it and, like, use that to kind of navigate. And then she points at the door that's directly behind the demon. And they have to, like, scoot along the wall as not to draw its attention, and Carrion is having to, like, scoot on the floor. They're almost at the door when the wall behind them begins to move, and it, like, pulls the demon's attention towards them. And all 4 of them make it through the door, but unfortunately, Morthril, which is the demon's name, his name is Morthril, he follows them as well. And Fisher's like, it's not supposed to leave its enclosure, but it's really hungry. I don't remember, I didn't write down what it keeps saying, but I think it keeps saying something about how it's hungry, like, really wants a snack, so it's going to follow these guys out of here because they look tasty. Fisher and Ceres are able to, like, kill it, but Fisher warns that it will respawn again shortly, like, it'll come back to life. He explains that it'll be smaller, but faster. So, like, pros and cons to it respawning. Ceres is trying to lead them through the next part of the maze, but the walls, like, keep moving on her, and so she keeps having to, like, stop and reassess and re-listen to the silver. They're, like, slamming down in front of them and, like, pushing them back, and Fisher explains that they must be on the right path if Malcolm is trying so hard to stop them, because this is Malcolm's maze, so he can control it. But the Quicksilver continues to call to her. She can hear it whispering, she comes, this way, alchemist, come and find us. And then they finally crash into the middle of the labyrinth. It is kind of crazy that it took Fisher, like, over 100 years to get to the center, and it literally takes Ceres, like, 3.5 minutes. Like, it doesn't really seem like they're in the labyrinth that long. I understand, like, the walls are moving, and she, like, has a distinct advantage, because, like, the Quicksilver is calling to her, but, like, if it's not that big, it seems like you could have just wandered to the center before 102 years of constantly walking around. They land in this huge mound of silver coins, and there must have been, like, 1 million of them, what Ceres says. And Lorith says, so many years trapped here, brother. Where did you sleep? How did you eat? How did you survive? Just then, who should arrive but Malcolm? He's here for the fun and the games of it all. His voice echoes off the walls. He didn't, did you? My love, I may be a vampire, but I was once a fae. The magic I was born with still sings a dark chorus in my veins. I used to craft this place especially for our kingfisher, so that he wouldn't be plagued with such tiresome requirements as rest and sustenance. So as long as he remained within the bounds of my playground, he needed neither. Thoughtful of me, no? So he didn't need to eat or sleep. So he spent 102 years not eating, not sleeping, just running around the maze, and that's how long it took him to find the center? Crazy. And then Madra and Belkian appear behind him as well, and Belkian says, you really think you can kill me with a powerless sword? You can't kill any of us with a mere blade. We are the triumvirate, dog. 3 crowns sharing one source. To kill one of us, you must kill all of us, and that is no easy task. And Fisher says, I'm willing to give it a chance. And Ceres can feel the Quicksilver, the, like, big pool, but it's on the other side of the mountain of where the bad guys are standing, and she's like, it's going to be tricky to get there. Carrion steps forward with Simon, his magic sword held aloft. He says to them, we might think that Fisher is an arrogant ass, but we're not going to just let you kill him. We especially aren't going to let him be killed by someone who'd hand over his own daughter to be tortured and enthralled by a vampire. And Fisher and Ceres are, like, mentally going back and forth, being like, what the hell do you think he's doing? Like, why is he decided that, like, he's going to take these guys on personally? Belkian says, every trap needs a lure, and Everlayne was born to serve my crown. Like, he essentially implies that, like, because she is his daughter, he can do with her what he wishes. Carrion says, she won't die. The venom is being drained from her as we speak. And Ceres is like, stop. I don't know what you're doing, Carrion, but stop. And Malcolm says, I don't know if you know who you are threatening. And Fisher, mentally to Ceres, says, listen to me. These coins are fake. The original coin that Belkian struck our deal with was made of silver. It burned Malcolm's hand when he caught it. He wouldn't even be able to stand on it with so many coins without them affecting him. The original coin would have had traces of Quicksilver in it too. The people of the city believed it was good luck. They thought it would bring them good fortune and connect them to the gods. Do any of these coins contain Quicksilver? And Sarah says no. Actually, I don't even think they're made of metal at all. They're made of some sort of like magical illusion. Meanwhile, Carrion's still yapping. He says, nothing's stopping you. Go ahead, leech, bite me. And Sarah says, like, Carrion, no. Just then Malcolm grabs Carrion and starts to drain him of blood. And Sarah is like trying to pull away, but the boys are holding her back as like Malcolm like starts to like lose himself into bloodlust as he drinks from Carrion. And Carrion says, as he's being drank from, you really should have let me finish my introduction earlier. It's rude to interrupt people. My name is Carrion Swift, but there was a time when I was known as Carrion Dianthius, firstborn son to Rurik and Amelia Dianthius. This is one of my favorite parts in this book. I love the fact that like Carrion has secretly been the Fae Prince the whole time. Like I feel like typically in a romantasy novel, the like love interest would be the secret Fae Prince, but like Carrion's the secret Fae Prince. Also, I just like love secret princes. There was a show in like a decade ago on TLC called Secret Princes. I'm pretty sure. I have like a vague memory of it, and it was like a running joke with me and my friends in college. We'd be like, what if he's a secret prince? What if he's a secret prince? It could happen. It could happen to anyone. He could be a secret prince, like this guy. And then Malcolm begins to like shake, and these like black veins pop up on his body, on his little pale face, and he says, you tricked me into drinking Dianthius blood. And Fisher's like, now's the moment. Can you sense where it is? The coin, to Saris. And Saris hears the smallest whisper, and she says, I've got it. Meanwhile, smoke is like pouring from Malcolm's mouth. He's like not doing well. It was not a good idea to drink Carrion's blood. Fisher says to Saris, mentally, this is the whole combo is happening with her nogs only. Fisher says, is it here? And Saris says, no, not here. And Fisher says, but inside the labyrinth. Saris nods, and then Fisher gives her solace, and he says to her, then go find it, end this. And so Saris takes off on herself, starts running off into the labyrinth. It's really spooky. It's like silent out there now that she's all alone, and she realizes that the crowds that have been chanting this whole time have gone silent. And then she hears the Quicksilver calling her name, Saris, Saris. And Saris goes, where are you? I need you. And the Quicksilver says, not need, want. And Sarah says, no, like I literally need you. I need to save my friends. I need you to help me. Please show me where you are. And the Quicksilver says, a bargain then. And Sarah says like, no bargains, no tricks, no deals. And the Quicksilver says, then why would we help? What is in it for us, girl? And Sarah says, because this is wrong. What they're doing here, it's evil, and you can end that. And the Quicksilver says, evil and good are two sides of the same coin. And they laugh. They think that's a funny joke, which it kind of is, okay? There is always evil. There is always good. And Sarah says, yes, but look how much evil exists here. So much pain and death and suffering. Isn't it time for some good? For some balance? I love him. I can't bear for him to die. And the Quicksilver says, the Kingfisher, your mate. And then the Quicksilver goes silent, and she can't feel the threads that lead her to like the Quicksilver anymore. Like they're gone. She's just like alone in this labyrinth with like no idea where she is. And the Quicksilver says, a small favor then. We will do it for a favor and a restoration of balance. And Sarah says, okay, I will owe you a small favor. And the Quicksilver says, this way then. And she rounds the corner to where the Quicksilver has led her to, and she finds Morthrin. It is still dead, but she knows it won't be for long. And Sarah says, where are you? And the Quicksilver says, inside, we're inside. And she can sense it inside the creepy Spider-Man's corpse in its mouth. She looks a little closer. She can actually see the coin like glistening at the very back of his throat. Ugh, gross. And so she goes to stick her hand in there and grab it. And as she's looking at her hands, she realizes they're covered in tattoos, including the god bindings on her wrists. And she realizes that when she had like confessed her love for Kingfisher, her mate, out loud, it had like accepted the bond. And so they're like officially bonded now. Anyway, she has to stick her hand into the creature's mouth. It's like slimy, ooey, and gooey, and a bad time. A bad time. I would cry if I had to do it. I would do it, but I would cry about it. The moment she grabs the coin, the creature twitches. Scary, spooky. And then Malcolm is behind her and grabbing her wrist. And he says, you better give me that coin, girl. And Saris obviously isn't going to give him the coin. Even as Malcolm like starts to like cut into her skin with her nails. He's not looking super well after the whole drinking Dianthius blood situation, but he's still, pretty strong. Malcolm says, interfering in the plans of immortals is never advisable, Sarah, especially when they've expended so much time and effort into those plans. Open your hand. And Sarah says, no, enough is enough. Fisher has suffered enough. These people have suffered enough. This deal that you made is over. And Malcolm explains that he's kind of surprised that she exists at all. Madra had tried to kill all of the alchemists back in Isilvarin, but it was really hard to root out any magic in the half-fae and like their children, the like small drops of magic left. But it's like kind of crazy to him how much power she has for how little fae blood is like in her system. He's like, maybe I should keep you alive to help me. I'll need some help after that Dianthius wretch. And Sarah says, I won't help you. Even if I was willing, like, I really have nothing to offer. I can only work with the Quicksilver. And Malcolm, like, chucks her at that. He, like, throws her all the way across the room. And the widow's bane is starting to wear off, so she can start to feel the fact that, like, she's beaten up. Like, she's bruised and broken boned everywhere. But she knows she cannot pass out. She can actually, like, hear a voice, Fisher's voice in her head telling her, like, she has to stay awake. Malcolm kicks the sword away from her and then steals the sword out of her hand, putting it into a little pouch on his belt. And he says, earth, air, fire, water, salt, brimstone, and quicksilver. The full gamut. More power than any alchemist I've ever encountered. You are capable of restoring me to my power and a lot more besides. Then he comments on her mating mark, talks about how he had offered to wipe the memory of Giltry from Fisher's brain if he fed from Malcolm once. And if we recall, drinking blood is a sex thing. So, ew, that's kind of yucky. Fisher had said no. And Malcolm's like kind of annoyed that he went drinking from a human. And he was like, yeah, I could smell it on Fisher the moment I saw him again that he had been drinking from you. Sarah lunges for Malcolm while he's yapping and stabs him in the throat with the dagger she had on her thigh. It wasn't as good as her sword, but like would do. Malcolm's now pouring blood from his neck. He punches her so hard in the stomach that it like rips through all of her organs. Like it's a really hard punch, stomach punch into her lungs. Her organs are mushy now and outside of her body, which is bad. You want to keep those inside. Sarah immediately knows she's dying. She can hear Fisher's voice in her head saying, hold on, Sarah, I'm coming. But she knows he won't be fast enough. Like she's a goner. Malcolm's not looking great either, but like clearly she didn't do enough to kill him. He taunts her by telling her that she's going to last just long enough for Kingfisher to arrive and like watch her die. Sarah promises him, I'm going to kill you. It'll be the last thing I do, but it'll be worth it. And Malcolm says, you can't kill me. I'm eternal. And even as he's saying it, she sees like the wound she had just caused in her neck his neck start to close up. But then he looks down and he sees that pouch that she had stolen from him while he was busy punching her in the chest, she has now. And Sarah flips the coin and it lands on the ground. It no longer really matters what side it lands on. There are no people left to save, but as soon as it hits the ground, the whole place starts to shake, and the souls in the stand start chanting, a North Rathmore, and they are finally turned to ash and swept away in this like huge wind, their pain finally at an end. And Malcolm looks up into the emptying stands around him, and he says, they were to be my army, and you took them from me. But when he turns back around, Sarah isn't where he left her. She's standing, holding Solace, and she slices his head clean off. And because all the people are gone, magic is back. So there was so much death in the air that, like, there was not magic. But now that the dead people are gone, there's magic. And so Solace, with its magic powers, cuts off Malcolm's head. And Sarah says, only the gods are eternal. His body bursts into this blue flame that like knocks Sarah back on the ground. She'd used the last of her strength to behead Malcolm. And then like Solace has this like blue lightning coming out of it. It has like been restored back to its like God's power. And Fisher is shouting in her mind, Saris. And Saris is like, it's fine. I'll be okay. What about Madra? And Fisher explains, the coward disappeared into the Quicksilver as soon as the wind hit. And Sarah asks, and Belkion? And Fisher says, Lorith's dealing with him and Carrion. Their swords are channeling again. Where are you? And Sarah explains that she is by Morthrill. And Fisher says, don't worry, I'm coming. She passes out, and when she comes to, Fisher is standing over her alongside Taladaius. And Fisher says, it's okay, Sarah. You're going to be all right. And Sarah is too weak to speak, so mentally she says, when Telena said that one of the mates marked with a god binding always died, I didn't think it would happen so quickly. And Fisher's like, you're not going to die. And Tal says, I'm afraid she is. It'll happen soon, no matter what. The damage to her stomach and chest cavity is too great. If we don't act, she'll pass in the next few minutes. And Fisher says, I'll give her part of my soul. And Tal is like, you can't. You already gave too much to Lorith. You'll immediately decline if you try to. And Fisher says, I don't give a crap. I've lived plenty, Tal. She's barely lived at all. I'm giving it to her. And Sarah says, like, no, Fisher, she doesn't, like, want him to die. And Fisher says, I have to. I'm not letting you die. And Sarah says, you're not breaking your promise to me. You swore you'd never take away my free will again. That's what you'd be doing if you heal me and I die in the process. I don't want to take your soul. And Fisher says, I can handle the consequences of breaking a promise if it means you live. And Sarah says, you said in your letter that we'd have time after this life, that there was more for us. If you do this, there won't be. I told you I'd never forgive you if you forced me to do something that I didn't want to do again. Never is a long time, Fisher. If you sacrifice yourself for me, I'll reject our bond in this life and the next. Okay? And then Tal's like, there is another way. Let me help. But if you want me to act, it has to be now. Like, we don't have much time at all. And Sarah says, like, what is he talking about? And Fisher says, Tal was second only to Malcolm in power. He hid it from the king, so Malcolm wouldn't kill him. He can turn you. And Sarah says, I don't want to be a feeder. And Fisher says, you wouldn't be. You'd be like him. And Sarah asks, would I have to feed? And Fisher goes, we don't know. And Tal is like, come on, she's fading. We have seconds. Tell me she consents. The world's like fading away for Sarah. And Fisher's voice was the last thing she heard. Fisher's voice is the last thing she hears as she like fades into blackness, and he says to Tal, she consents. Did she? I don't know if she really did, but Sarah is in immense pain. As she comes to, the amphitheater is like crumbling around them. She's lying in Fisher's arms. Lorith is like yelling for Fisher to make a shadow gate to get them out of that amphitheater before it collapses entirely. He's also trying to like cradle his girlfriend. There's a lot happening for old Kingfisher. And Sarah hears in her head from like the voice of the Quicksilver. The mountain that weathers all storms. He is the storm. You are the peace that must come after it. Tell me, do you believe in the fates, alchemist? Fisher has managed to open a gate, and Sarah is like, well, at least I'll get to die in his bed. That'll be nice. And the voice continues. Do not drift too far from the shore, Sarah Spain. Come back now. Come back. And then it feels like something has electrocuted her, like restarting her heart. She like was like jolted. And Taladaius goes, it's starting. And the voice continues in her head. You stand before a door. Your hand is poised to knock. Are you ready to walk through it? Will you leave this place and see what lies beyond the next? And Sarah responds, no, I don't want to go. Not yet. The voice continues. A shadow falls across Yavalia. It will alter all it touches. You would rather remain here knowing that suffering and hardship loom on the horizon? That sacrifices will need to be made? And Sarah looks at Fisher and is like, yes. And the voice says, as you wish. Then we call in our favor, Sarah Spain. Will you honor your word and grant us your favor? And Sarah says, what is it that you want from me? And the Quicksilver says, we require an audience with you, Sarah Spain. Will you grant us our favor? And Sarah says, yes, I'll grant it. And she tries to specify that she'll grant it like after she's feeling a little bit better, since she's on like death's doorstep. But immediately she starts to get ripped from Fisher's arms, and then she is just like pulled through the labyrinth like she's on an invisible rope. She's just like yanked through the place, which like can't be good for her. She was on like death's doornail, death's door. And all of her organs are leaving her body. She has broken ribs. This seems like a bad time to get dragged through a labyrinth, but what are you gonna do? Sarah is like yelling and trying to get it to stop, but like she just keeps scooting along. She's pulled to that room full of coins, and then she's pulled all the way like through the coins to the Quicksilver pool and like pulled through the pool. When she wakes up, she hears these two voices above her. It's dead. Don't be ridiculous. Of course it isn't dead. How can you be so sure? Because Father willed it here. Stupid. He doesn't want it to be dead, therefore it isn't. Well, it looks dead. Sarah opens her eyes and sees blue skies and this like pair of identical like teen girls. She says they look like 18 and 19. And one of the first girl says, tell us what it's like. And Sarah says like, sorry, what? Tell you what's like? What's going on? And the girl says, sleeping with that male, our father's champion. And Sarah's like, Fisher? Guys, where am I? What is going on? What a weird first question. And they're like, yeah, Fisher. And the girl says, we wanted to try him out for ourselves, but our father forbade it. He deems no living creature from any realm worthy of our touch. We've been waiting an eon for him to gift us with our own playmate. But thus far, no other of our kind has braved the journey to visit Corcoran. And that is when we realize these are the god twins, Bal and Mithin, and they ask Sarah, like, who's more popular, like, who gets more worship back in the other realm. And Sarah realizes, like, she's with the gods. She's like, oh, that's where we are. And Sarah very deftly replies, "How could anyone love Ball or more than Mithin, or treasure Mithin more than Ball? You're worshipped equally by all those who know your names, my ladies." And one of the girls says, "Such lovely manners. Okay, come on, father is waiting." They walk her over to their father, and he is Zareth, god of chaos, and he immediately knows who she is too, obviously. He's the one who requested her presence. And he says, "We must make this quick, or you'll die before you've been of use to me. I will be as concise as I can given the circumstances. I've spent a great deal of time watching the threads of the universe, waiting for one such as you, an alchemist, at last, to reset the balance and clear the way for what is to come." And Ceres follows him to this big pool of quicksilver that is at the base of this oak tree. That's the only thing around. It's this blue sky and these rolling hills and this one gorgeous oak tree. He says to her, "Here we stand at the edge of the universe. The roots you see growing down into the earth, into the quicksilver, are the anchors of fate. The silver leaves above mark all the realms of our domain. My family are the stewards of all you see here. We water the roots of fate. We train the boughs and prune the leaves to prevent rot and decay. You see that bough there? The blackened one? There is rot spreading throughout my domain, Ceres. Realms that are infected with rot have to be destroyed to protect the rest of the tree and prevent that rot from spreading. Do you understand?" And he magically removes 3 branches from the tree, just vanishing them away. And Ceres is like, "How many people was that?" And he says, "Billions." And she's like, Cool. He goes on to say, "You aren't the only alchemist in the universe, of course. There are millions of you out there. Even in your realm, even in the city you once called your home, there are hundreds of elemental magic wielders who can command the quicksilver. But when I consulted the fates long ago, I was very intrigued when I saw you, Ceres Vane. Not just you, Kingfisher too. I saw an axis in the flow of things, a burning knot in the tapestry of all that would come to be. When I focused and saw the strength of that bond that connected the two of you together, I admitted I attempted to sway the fates. You were supposed to have been born Fae, in the same realm as your Kingfisher, so I separated you. Hundreds of years before you were born, I shifted the events around your birth, moved the pieces on the board, and placed you far away, in a realm that should have never come into contact with his. But I watched as the boughs of the universe grew against their nature and aligned in such a way that you would still meet. I foresaw then that no matter how the boughs and branches of this tree were manipulated, you and he would always collide. There was nothing I could do to stop it. Why? I asked. Why would you want to keep us apart? What does it matter to you if we love each other and live our lives together? In nature, there's a counterweight to everything, child. Light has darkness, life has death, joy has sorrow, and good has evil. That law applies no matter which realm you exist in, he said with a broad stroke of his arm that encompassed the many, many leaves on the tree. Threads like you and Kingfisher that are drawn together and cross on an axis create a well of power. The energy that the two of you draw together attracts an equal and opposite counterweight. Every possible future where the two of you are together ends with the vast majority of this tree dying. None of us can foresee any other way. So you're saying that Fisher and I are responsible for the end of the entire universe? Zareth shook his head. Not you personally, but the moment where you meet, along with the moment you become mates, is a spark, the flame in the dark that draws the moth. It was incumbent upon me to try and stop that spark from taking place, but, as you have already learned, the fates themselves would not be guided down that path. And then Zareth explains that he had once tried to talk to Fisher about this too, but he'd been too cranky, and it had been right after Fisher's mother had died, and he just had been in a bad mood, and he had made an enemy of my family. He was only allowed to live because Zareth demanded it. And then he kind of goes on to explain that there are a few pathways that, instead of leading to certain death of the whole universe, lead to uncertainty, and all of those futures have the fact that they are God-bound in common, because those oaths mark you as Zareth's ward. They protect both Kingfisher and Ceres from the other gods. And Ceres is like, why would we need protection from them? And Zareth explains that they would rather kill Fisher and roll the dice on what comes next. They want the clean slate. But he's like, but my daughters are obsessed with Fisher, so I've decided to give you a chance. See if you can figure it out. He says, if you truly accept Fisher as your mate, then you must agree for the thread of your life to be severed from the tapestry of the universe. Once you do, none of us may affect your future. We won't be able to see you at all, nor will my brothers and sisters be able to interfere with the timelines or events that affect you either. You will be on your own. Ceres is like, this burden shouldn't be placed on one person's shoulders. It definitely shouldn't be placed on mine. I'm just a thief, just one woman. I can't be held responsible for... And Zareth says, you are not responsible for anything. All you need to do is live your life. Let me put it this way, child. Do you want your mate to die? And Ceres says, of course not. And Ceres says, then this is how you save him. And he says, F the fates. They don't get to decide anything for me. I decide what my future is going to be. Didn't you say that just days ago? If you truly wish to be the master of your own life, then this is how you accomplish that goal. And Sarah says, like, okay, how painful is the thread cutting? And Sarah says, no more painful than the transition that is already beginning to take place inside your body as we speak. And Sarah says, how would you do it exactly? And Sarah says, by transforming you into something that has never been seen before. The universe cannot focus on which it does not recognize. I am not just the god of chaos, alchemist. I am also the god of change. I will it, and it is done. Time is running out, Sarah, so you must make your decision. And Sarah says, okay, all right, I'll do it. And then her god binding marks on her wrist start to burn. And Zareth says, the best of luck to you then, Sarah. Give Kingfisher my best. And then he shoves her into the Quicksilver pool. Next thing she knows, she's floating amongst the stars. And she thinks, and we get this like little like dreamy sort of thought. I observed the universe, and the universe observed me back. I was born and died 100 times, and then I saw something that shouldn't have been. A bird. It flitted around me in the void, its beautiful wings flashing blue and green. It sang a song so sweet that I remembered what it was like to have a heart, if only so I could feel it ache. And then she remembers her mate, and she starts reaching for Fisher. Ceres wakes up, and she's in a bed in a room she does not recognize, and she immediately is very nauseous, and she starts to throw up. Taladaius is standing in the room, and he explains to her, they call it the Great Purge. Your body has undergone some stark changes of late. The general consensus is that you'll be able to eat food again soon, but it might take a day or two. When I transitioned, it took me 6 months before I didn't hack up anything that I was trying to eat like a hairball. And Sarah says, what do you mean I transitioned? And Tal says, you know what I mean by that word, don't you? And Ceres remembers that she's a vampire now. And she says, I am nothing like you. And Tal says, yeah, I know. And then he brings her a mirror and shows her that, like, she has, like, pointy fae ears and pointy teeth like a vampire. Crazy. And he explains that they think she's half vampire and half fae. They don't totally know what that means, except that she is very much not human anymore. And Sarah asks, where's Fisher? And Tal says, he's around. He'll be around. He'll be here shortly. And Sarah says, where are we? And Tal says, Fisher asked me to let him tell you where we are. And Sarah says, why? And then she goes to the window and opens the curtains, but the sunlight burns her eyes and she like closes them pretty quickly. Tal explains, you'll be able to tolerate it better than most soon enough. This will all just take some getting used to. What about your memory? What do you remember about Gilthry, Ceres? And she's able to remember most of everything up until the point where Tal bit her, and he explains that he had put a block on her memory for that time because it is like really painful and like seemed like a bad time to remember. But she asked to remember, and then she remembers everything. She remembers the bite. She remembers Fisher carrying her through the Shadowgate and the Quicksilver Pool and the conversation with Zareth and Lorenth singing to her for 3 days of immense pain. And she also remembers that she had bitten Tal at some point. And she says, why did I bite you? And he says, Fisher should be here for this. And Sarah says, a part of me feels like I should thank you for saving my life, and the rest of me wants to kill you for what you've done. And Tal says, I felt the same way for a long time. There were whole centuries where I hated what I'd become and wanted to destroy Malcolm. I wanted nothing but to die and be gone from this world so badly. Malcolm wouldn't let me go. I tried to kill myself once, and he forbade me from ever trying again. His word was law. And Sarah says, like, well, he's dead now. And Tal says, I'm free, and I'm still trying to decide what that means for me. But things have gotten rather interesting recently. There are two kinds of forever alchemist. One is heaven, the other is hell. Doesn't matter what I do. Make sure you choose your version of immortality wisely. Then Carrion is in the room, and he has transformed too. He is now looking very fey. He has pointed ears. He's looking so tall. Ceres punches him when she sees him. She's really mad that he lied to her whole life about the fact that he was a fey prince. And Carrion explains, well, it's hardly something you can tell people, Fane. Anyway, my grandmother made me promise not to. And Ceres is like, except she wasn't your grandmother, was she? And Carrion says, no, not really. She was more of a ward or a playmate when she was little. And then she was a friend. And then I was her ward. I don't know. It always got very complicated as people aged. And then Fisher's, and he kind of explains how he ended up there. Fisher's father had taken Carrion to Zulvarin to save him from Belkin, and he had been glamored to look human. A human woman had rescued him from the Quicksilver Pool, had taken him to the third, and like raised him as her own child there. And so he's just been chilling in Zulvarin for like 1,000 years, trying to stay out of trouble. He didn't know what to expect when the Quicksilver awakened, although he like knew about the existence of Fae. He's been like alone in this world. He didn't really know about like the specifics of the politics of what was happening with this war. And he had lied to Fisher about the fact that he was Hayden to protect Hayden. He's like, I like want you to know, Sarah, so this was not like some grand scheme. Like I was really just trying to protect your brother. And then we learned that he survived Malcolm's venom because Dianthius blood, his like father's blood, was used to create the blood curse. So as like part of that curse, the vampires can't drink from a living member of that bloodline or enthrall them, which is why Malcolm had Carrion's parents killed, and why Carrion had to flee was because they were like incredibly dangerous to vampires in general. We also learned that Everlayne is alive, but in a deep, deep sleep. Taladaius and Isabel are convinced that she'll wake up any day now, but like for now, she's still sleeping. Then Fisher arrives in the room and kicks Carrion out. And Sarah says to him, aren't you sad that you don't get to call me Little Osha anymore? And Fisher says, human, fae, or vampire, it doesn't matter. How long you live, Sarah, you will always be the most sacred to me. Did I do the right thing? He asks about like the turning her into a vampire, and she like doesn't really know how to answer. We'll find out, I guess. And then she's like looking at Fisher, and she realizes that his eye is looking like less silver than it normally is, and she like gasps. And he explains that Taladaius and Isabel worked together to dampen the Quicksilver effects, and it like worked pretty well. He had been seeing like Taladaius as a healer, and what she had been doing hadn't been working like great recently, but with the addition of like the witch, they were able to like get something together that like was actually quite helpful. And Sarah is like pretty excited because he's like not going to lose his mind now, probably, if there's like something they can do to like dampen the Quicksilver's effect. She thinks to herself, we still had Belkin to deal with and Madra. I still intended to find my brother in Elroy. There were a million other issues we had to overcome, but... And then Fisher says to her, one foot in front of the other. Let's make it through today, and then tomorrow, and then the day after that. And that one will be particularly interesting. And Saris goes, why? What's happening the day after tomorrow? And he leads her over to the window. It's night now, so there's nothing to burn her skin when they pull back the curtains. And she looks out, and she can see like the campfires of the war camp across the Darn. And she realizes that they are on the wrong side of the river. They are in Ammonontroth. Fisher says, in the Fae courts, the crown is passed down to the regent's heir, but if the regent is murdered, the crown is claimed by the one who slew them. The vampire court has only ever had one king. Malcolm never named an heir. He planned on living forever. He never conceived of the possibility that someone might kill him. And Saris goes, absolutely not, Fisher. I'm not even a full vampire. I'm half Fae. I can't be the queen. And Fisher says, tell them that, as far as the vampire court is concerned, you are to be coronated. In 2 days' time, you'll officially become the new queen of Sansaroth. Yay! And that's where Quicksilver ends. Ah! Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. She's the queenie. She's the queenie now. Yay! I'm so excited. So, that is where we'll pick up for Brimstone. I hope you enjoyed this recap. I had a really great time putting it together. This book was like such a fun little surprise. I love a vampire. I'm really excited to see where things go. I think we're really getting into like the nitty gritty of it. I think it is supposed to be a duology. So I think I like heard that somewhere. So I think Brimstone might be the end of that. We'll see. We'll see. I hope you have a gorgeous, gorgeous time reading Brimstone. And I will see you back here for my next video. Bye.